Hey everybody, I'm Christina with a K, and welcome to the debut episode of what I hope will be an ongoing series. This is Transgender in a Blender, and what I would like to be doing here is talking about trans issues from a very unorthodox perspective, and with an emphasis on autogynephilia, also known as AGP. For those of you who know, I am an autogynephile. I'm very proud of that fact. So it's an issue that's very near and dear to my heart. But I'm free to discuss other trans issues with people who identify as gender nonconforming. By all means, I welcome that. So hence the transgender in a blender. Breaking the mold and expanding horizons as to what it is to be trans. So, and I am so honored today to have as my guest Dr. Kevin Su. He is the assistant professor of clinical psychology at Pennsylvania State University at Abington College. And we have a history going back of several months. We've corresponded and gotten to know each other fairly well. I'm happy to call him a friend. And he's definitely a friend to the autogynephile community. So, here's Dr. Su. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Christina, for having me and for giving me this platform for us to talk about what I hope will be really stimulating discussions, and hopefully we'll get other people talking about these issues a lot more and a lot more critically. And I just want to say I really enjoyed corresponding with you over these past few months, and I love your channel. I love the positivity and just good feelings and good vibes that you are putting out there with respect to AGP or autogynephilia and issues related to gender in general. And I just think that it's really awesome and invigorating. And I've already seen lots of folks just feel a lot more comfortable with themselves or a lot more open about talking about AGP as a result of what you've been doing. So thank you for everything that you're doing, and I'm honored to be your first guest on the on this in this series. So yeah, thanks again for having me.
Oh no, the honor is all mine. But thank you so much for your kind words. It's greatly appreciated. I mean, I do my bit. I'm an INFP personality, so it's like I have this passion to make a difference in the world. So I can't help it. That's how I'm hardwired. I'm just so passionate about reaching out to my fellow autogynephiles and just letting them know, like, I love them, I support them, and we're not monsters, we're not freaks, we're beautiful human beings, and that's what the purpose of my videos is. So yeah, thank you so much. And just let you folks know, he is a doctor, but he is kind enough to let me know that he wishes to be addressed as Kevin, because he is not a stuffy academic. Basically, he is a millennial, so like a young, fresh mind. Not some stuffy intellectual wears a jacket with like patches on the elbows, smoking a pipe. So yeah, tweed jacket, exactly. So yeah,
those were quite fashionable for academics back in the day.
Back in the day, no, he's very much a millennial, so like a youngster, as well. So yeah, going forward, please don't think I'm being disrespectful to his title. He asked me to address him as Kevin because we do know each other. So okay, so Kevin, starting off here, could you please tell us in your own words what autogynephilia is?
Sure. Well, in a nutshell, autogynephilia describes a natal male's propensity to be sexually aroused by the thought or fantasy of being a woman. And so this term autogynephilia, which was coined back in the 80s by a psychologist, Ray Blanchard, who you've talked about on your channel and perhaps some of your viewers are familiar with, it described at the time a phenomenon that had kind of been already understood or explored by other sex researchers, for example, Magnus Hirschfeld, in terms of, he was looking at men who like to cross-dress and was able to see that, there were possibly different types of men who enjoyed cross-dressing and perhaps might desire to become a woman. And so autogynephilia applies to one type of person who enjoys cross-dressing and desires to be a woman. Um, and, uh, and and so that's kind of where that theory started, and it's been applied in lots of other different contexts as well. But that's kind of, we might go into that a bit more as we go into this interview, but that's essentially autogynephilia in a nutshell. The sexual arousal from the fantasy of being a woman that seems to apply to not only male cross-dressers, but also some men who desire to transition and live as women.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, because this is for the benefit of those of you who are new to my series, or basically just maybe came up across this by chance. The YouTube algorithm just kind of threw this video into your playlist. You might like this, so there you know. Okay, so down the rabbit hole. No turning back now. So now, I know we've piqued your interest. So okay, here we go. So okay, I've got several questions here, but like I said, it's not going to be a stiff format. 10 questions in all, and from there we'll just kind of um, go off on tangents as we see fit, witty banter as well. So, but here we go. Question number one. So bear with me. I got to read from my notes because I have a very poor memory. So um, what led you to want to dedicate yourself to AGP study and research?
Well, Christina, as you know from your work, looking into autogynephilia, talking with members of different autogynephilic communities, people with autogynephilia. So whether we're talking about men who enjoy cross-dressing or trans women who have, transition and live full-time as women, and kind of anywhere in between that kind of spectrum, those individuals have often been stigmatized. They've often been marginalized within the LGBTQ community by the political right. So just autogynephilic individuals have been kind of grossly misunderstood. The concept of autogynephilia has been grossly mischaracterized by all political sides, I would argue, both the left and the right. So I think it's really important that we bring more scientific research, more attention to this subject so that autogynephilic individuals might be able to better understand themselves, given how little is out there. Loved ones of autogynephilic persons, clinicians, mental health professionals who might be able to work with them can be better attuned to these issues and have more evidence, scientific evidence to guide certain decisions and help them kind of navigate this what can often be a very confusing and lonely and shameful process for a lot of autogynephilic individuals. And a lot of autogynephilic teens especially feel a lot of shame about their sexuality and what this means for them. You talked about this in some of your earlier videos about how before your channel, a lot of the content on autogynephilia was, quite frankly, painted it in a very depressing light. Like it's something that people did not want for themselves, or that they did not want for others, or it was, this fetish that described men who like to cross-dress, and that is why, we shouldn't have trans women in bathrooms or something. It's just the discourse on this has been all over the place and hurting a lot of people, especially autogynephilic people. And so I'm glad your channel is promoting more positivity around AGP, and that it can be something individuals can embrace and hopefully help them move forward knowing more about this concept. However, we just don't know a lot about it. And so through my research on AGP and autogynephilia, I'm hoping to amplify autogynephilic voices so that they're better understood, that they can move beyond this caricature of being perverted men with a fetish, that autogynephilic individuals are more diverse, maybe more dimensional than they are often understood by all different kinds of people who have been have kind of misguided ideas about AGP. So and that kind of goes back. Actually, I just had the thought that you had this whole video that you did. Excellent video, by the way. I think it was number 6 about different categories of AGP. Right? Not a lot of people understand that AGP is not just men who get off cross-dressing. It's a lot more nuanced than that. It spans everything from cross-dressers all the way to trans women and non-binary individuals, lots of different kinds of people. And we need more research to look into these issues to understand all different aspects and dimensions of AGP and what that means for them and how to help guide certain decisions that autogynephilic individuals might have regarding their relationships or mental health, decisions around transition and using hormones. All of this is pretty much unknown at this point. And there's been a lot of great work that set the foundation for the study of AGP, but there's not an outpouring of research right now. And so I feel really compelled hearing stories from autogynephilic individuals all the time, hearing that they don't know what to do or that there's no resources or support. I feel compelled that to deliver something, some scientific research to help uncover more about this phenomenon. So that's kind of where I'm coming from with this work.
Well, thank you so much for doing it. I mean, yeah, it's wonderful that because you're like one of the precious few academics on the planet currently studying autogynephilia. I believe the other doctor I'm aware of was James Morandini down in Australia.
Yeah, he's my collaborator on a major survey that we're doing right now, which I think we'll be talking about that a little bit. But he and I are working on this very comprehensive survey of autogynephilia, recruiting a very large sample of, again, autogynephilic cross-dressers, autogynephilic trans women, non-binary individuals, all sorts of different folks within the AGP community to kind of really get a more nuanced understanding of this phenomenon and not just focus it on even sexuality or, we're looking at all sorts of facets. So we're looking at mental health. We're looking at how does AGP affect their relationships, both in a positive and negative way? How does it affect their feelings about themselves? We ask about the shame that they might feel or the positive feelings that they might have about AGP. We ask about their attitudes, about the concept of autogynephilia, about gender. It's a long survey. I'm sure anyone who's taken the survey can attest. It's take a while, almost an hour, sometimes more. So it's really, I'm really proud of the work that we've done on it so far. I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit more, maybe through this video. But yeah, I think other than James, who I've been very lucky to have as a partner in working on this, I don't know anyone else who really specifically studies AGP. You know what I mean? Some researchers might study it as a facet of some larger project that they are doing related to trans women or trans folks in general, but I don't know of any other researcher who makes that a focus of some line of their research other than myself and James.
No, and thank both you and Dr. Morandini for doing that, because it's like I kind of see like AGP research as being like this candle that's in a windstorm. It's like any second it could just like be gutted and cut off. It's like I kind of see you and Dr. like Morandini is kind of like huddling around that candle, like protecting it from the wind, so kind of keep that flame going. So it's like, yes, I mean, the research can't stop. I mean, so many of us do. I mean, most of us, those of us who do transitions, see ourselves as trans women above and beyond anything else. But yeah, I people like myself, I fully acknowledge. I am an autogynephile. I mean, I, I I dealt with those issues. I mean, in my videos, I talk about how I repressed that for most of my life, societal conditioning to not, that, being trans is wrong, or what's between your legs is your soul. They're both inextricably linked, which they're not. Your soul can be different from your genitalia. So, and one of those manifestations of this disconnect is autogynephilia. So, yeah, I mean, thank you so much, and Dr. Morandini, for wanting to like portray us in a sympathetic light, because I mean, I'm sure you're aware. I mean, so many of us kind of view the academic community with suspicion, or basically, like, I mean, as blasphemous as this may sound to you, being a psychologist, lots of people, they maybe ID loosely as autogynephiles, but they kind of don't really adhere to, like, Ray Blanchard's theory, basically, the orthodoxy of that. It's like, well, I mean, some of it maybe, but just the way it's presented, and like, for example, it's just, for lack of a better term, they got, yeah, I'm AGP, but how Blanchard presents it is not really how I ID and all that. But I mean, yeah, we can discuss it going forward. But
Yeah,
yeah, but thank you so much to you and Dr. Morandini, for what you're doing here. Yeah, keeping this flame going, not letting it die. But
of course.
so I mean, so how did you discover AGP? I mean, were you already a student and then you discovered this? Did you already know about it before you entered college?
Yeah, it's something that, I had been interested in for a while, and it kind of made sense naturally, as at the time when I was an undergraduate student at Northwestern University. I worked with Mike Bailey, who wrote a whole book called The Man Who Would Be Queen, that was detailed, autogynephilia, especially how it applied to one of the two types of, trans women. So that, maybe we'll get into the typology, Blanchard's typology of gender dysphoria a bit more. I kind of alluded to it earlier when I was describing autogynephilia. I didn't really get into it too much, which might have made my explanation of autogynephilia earlier a little bit confusing, because I didn't know how much we wanted to get into it at that time. But anyway, I had been studying paraphilias at the time, when I was an undergraduate. Specifically, one of my first independent projects was related to this paraphilia called gynandromorphophilia. Gynandromorphophilia referring to a sexual attraction to trans women, particularly those who retain their penis. And so there are men out there with gynandromorphophilia who are, attracted to trans women with a penis, and there hadn't really been any research on this since maybe the early 90s. Actually, Ray Blanchard and one of his colleagues did a study in 1993 that might have been the last empirical paper that was published on this topic. And so Mike Bailey suggested this as a potential avenue for me to do an independent project. And I was on board with that. I had already been doing some work related to sexual psychophysiology. So, that's, measuring genital sexual arousal patterns in the laboratory in response to different kinds of erotic stimuli. We had been doing that kind of methodology at the lab at Northwestern for some time. First project I was on was related to male bisexuality, where we brought bisexual, heterosexual, and gay identified men into the lab and measured their genital sexual arousal in response to different kinds of erotic stimuli. So erotic stimuli featuring two men, two women. I think we had some threesome clips as well. But in any case, it seemed like a natural progression studying the arousal patterns of bisexual men to gynandromorphophilic men, and then what actually came after that was, well, we noticed that a lot of men with gynandromorphophilia actually reported high scores on a measure of autogynephilia, which was really interesting. The reason we asked about autogynephilia was actually because in Ray Blanchard's study that he did in 1993, he actually found that his study was he actually recruited, or rather, I don't know that he actually recruited anyone, but he was there were these phone ads back in the 90s where people would leave, I'm forgetting, I think it's like voicemails, asking for, sexual services. And that's basically, I guess that's how he was conducting this study. And the main point being that out of a number of the men who were seeking the sexual services of a trans woman with a penis, or someone who was just a very feminine male, those men themselves like to cross-dress. So there was a larger than expected percentage of the men seeking sexual services from trans women or from male cross-dressers who were themselves cross-dressers. So that was an interesting part to that study, which is why when we did our study, I guess it was a little over a decade ago now, when I was an undergraduate, we asked about autogynephilia. And we found that significant percentage, not all of them, but a significant minority of the gynandromorphophilic men that we recruited scored high on autogynephilia. And so that led us to think like, well, it would be interesting to study autogynephilic individuals and see whether they are likely to be gynandromorphophilic. And so this kind of started off a research program that was really focused on paraphilias, and then kind of started to get really interested in autogynephilia in particular as well through that. So long story short, I was doing this work on gynandromorphilia, which is another paraphilia, kind of led to autogynephilia, and then things kind of took off from there. Like, I mean, as I was saying in response to your other question, it was like very clear that so little work had been done in this area that it seemed like an area that needed a lot of expansion, and it was a ripe area for study because nothing had really been done on autogynephilia since really the 90s. Now, I don't mean to discount Anne Lawrence, who is also an autogynephilic trans woman who published a lot of great papers on the subject of autogynephilia. However, she had kind of slowed down with that work kind of in the late 2000s and was mostly publishing more theoretical papers or review papers at that point. So her last big project was the Men Trapped in Men's Bodies book that you talk about in one of your other videos, where great book, collected really large, impressive number of narratives from autogynephilic individuals, mostly trans women actually, providing an opportunity to learn about their experiences firsthand, right? Because it was narrative work. So not really anything done since no empirical kinds of systematic studies done since the 90s. And so that was another reason that I was really motivated to pursue autogynephilia work at that time.
Yeah, I'm very perplexed that there aren't more academics studying this because it's so fascinating. It's like yeah, as you say, just you and like James Morandini and like that's it. It's like, I mean, really, it's like you said, it's kind of going down a rabbit hole. It's like that's how I discovered like autogynephilia. I first like acknowledged, well, yeah, I mean, I got aroused by the thought of being a woman. I mean, it would turn me on, but I didn't know there was a name for it, much less that there are other people like myself that felt this way. and he's like doing some research. It's like, oh, it was only like less than 2 years ago, like on the internet, I thought, oh, autogynephilia. It's like, oh, what's this? It's like I saw this, like it's like my head exploded. It's like, my God, there's actually a history of this. There's actually a term, research been done. There's other people like me that feel like this. For the longest time, I just identified like as a lesbian born in a male body. I just
Yeah.
because like, oh, yeah, like I'm attracted to women, but I also am attracted to the thought of myself being a woman. And it's like, well, and it's, oh, okay, so there is like this term for it. It's like, it's so like wonderful.
Yeah.
It's like cathartic. Yes, I'm not alone. There's actually others like me, and there's people that have studied this and given a name to it. And it's, as you said, the being attracted to trans women. I identify as that way. I mean, I mean, I I identify as gynephilic. I mean, like I'm strictly sexually attracted to women, be they cis or trans, but I'm not sexually attracted to men. That's my particular flavor of it. But yeah, I mean, I find trans women very attractive. It's like, I mean, growing up, in my adolescence, even when I was repressing, I always felt like people like drag queens or like cross dressers, female impersonators, get very sexy. It's like it just involuntarily, I just got sexually aroused. But it's like I thought, no, I can't feel this way because it must mean I'm gay. The conditioning. Oh, oh, you're attracted to women. You can't be gay. This confusion you go by because
Yeah.
you're not allowed to give like free reign expression to who you are, to explore your identity. I mean, I grew up in the 80s, which was like the dark ages still to be trans. It was still kind of the dark ages to be
Yeah.
gay, really, to be honest. It was the Reagan 80s, the AIDS scare. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like, oh my God, no, 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 that's a man. She may look like a woman, but it's a man. No, don't be attracted to them.
Right.
It's like, but no, but now I freed myself of my inhibitions and all my hang-ups. It's like, no, I fully admit, I just find femininity and womanhood to be very sexy and attractive. I don't care if that person was born with a penis and testicles. It doesn't matter to me. I find them, if I perceive them as a woman, I just find them attractive. And so that ties in perfectly to what you were just explaining there. So thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing and kind of talking about your own experiences and how I really appreciated you talking about how when you learned about autogynephilia, something kind of clicked for you, right? And I've heard that a lot from people with autogynephilia who also feel like, wow, I had no idea this term existed for it. I had no idea this body of research was out there. And that just goes to show you how much this work has kind of been suppressed in a way, has been kept under wraps. It's like this, and why should it be? Why is it this kind of like dirty secret that kind of is out there and people have to kind of stumble upon to better understand themselves and to feel like they can be understood? And so that's another thing that is really motivating me to do this work, is to try to push through this. You mentioned that there's no one really out there doing this work besides myself and James. I agree with that, and part of that reason is what we've been talking about, which is that people either don't know about this, or this work has been actively suppressed in some way, such that people who people don't really find out about it unless they really go out of their way to find out about it. It's not something that's in the mainstream discourse about sexuality or gender or really any of that. So it is frustrating for those of us who study this and people who are experiencing autogynephilia to have this work, basically not really talked about enough, and for their people to kind of misrepresent it a lot of the time.
No, thank you so much for that. So, okay, so we can come back to this later, but I want to go on to the second question here.
Sure.
Okay, sure. Okay. Okay. You kind of talked about this earlier, but what research have you conducted so far into autogynephilia?
Yeah. So I've done. I talked earlier about how I started, like the research kind of previous to autogynephilia was on this other paraphilia, gynandromorphophilia, sexual attraction to trans women with a penis. So we did a really interesting kind of sexual arousal study with that. We also did a really interesting sexual arousal study of autogynephilic male cross-dressers. That's basically the other side of the coin. So gynandromorphophilic men, they're attracted to trans women with a penis. They also tend to be autogynephilic themselves, to want to be women themselves. And then we found on the other side of the coin, autogynephilic, specifically autogynephilic male cross-dressers, tend to be gynandromorphophilic. They tend to be attracted to trans women with the penis. So kind of we looked at both sides of it, if that makes sense. And that was also a sexual arousal study. So and that was a fun study. That was what I think was a really cool study. I went with some of my research assistants. We went around in Chicago to different nightclubs that actually catered to cross-dressers, and we went to stores that catered to makeup and dressing people up to look more like women. We went to these stores out and a lot of them were in the suburbs, believe it or not. And then because at the time, these people that were going to these nightclubs, this was the early 2010s, they were mostly kind of middle-aged men, and a lot of them were married, and they would go out on the town dressed up as women, on the weekends, and then they'd have a night out. And so we actually, we befriended a lot of these folks at these nightclubs. It was fun, and they were very friendly, and I'm really thankful for their willingness and to talk with me and my research assistants, and to actually come out to Evanston, which was a different suburb of Chicago, and they go out all the way over there to take part in this research study that involved them coming into the lab and having their genital arousal measured in response to different erotic clips. So it was a big ask for them to do this. A lot of them came cross-dressed, which was really cool. Some of them didn't. We did that study. It took quite a while to recruit these individuals, because as you can imagine, we're talking like 2011, 2012, or people were suspicious about the kind of research that we were doing, and I'm really thankful that we were able to get, I think it must have been like about 25 cross-dressers, and we measured their arousal patterns and found that, yeah, they were generally heterosexual with respect to their sexual arousal patterns. They're showing much more genital arousal in response to the clips of two women than to the clips of two men having sex. But additionally, they showed really strong sexual arousal, almost similar to their arousal to the two women having sex, when they were shown clips of two trans women who have penises having sex. And so that was really cool, and that had never been done before, and kind of showed, not only through self-report, but also through this physiological data, that, autogynephilic individuals, at least autogynephilic male cross-dressers, tend to be gynandromorphophilic as well. So that was like the first study that we did, although that didn't get published for quite a while. That paper was not published until 2017. In the meantime, while we were writing up that paper, Mike Bailey, Alan Rosenthal, who was another graduate student at the time that I was, and myself, we published kind of a dense, in retrospect, paper on the psychometric structure of items that assessed autogynephilia. So we wrote a new scale that was meant to capture different types of autogynephilia. And maybe you've gone through this in one of your other videos or have read about it, but there seem to be different types of autogynephilia. So some individuals with autogynephilia, find it sexually arousing to wear women's lingerie or to wear women's clothing in general or to put on makeup. So that would be transvestic autogynephilia. There are also some individuals who just find the fantasy of having, women's breasts or a woman's face, woman's legs, woman's vulva. That is arousing to them. That's called anatomic autogynephilia. And then there's also behavioral autogynephilia. If you act and talk more like a woman, they find that arousing. There's interpersonal autogynephilia, so going out on a date with a man or imagining yourself as a woman having sex with a man, finding those things arousing. Interpersonal autogynephilia. And then finally, there's physiologic autogynephilia, which is, the idea of menstruating or being pregnant, that is arousing to some autogynephilic individuals. So there's 5 different types of autogynephilia, right? Anatomic, transvestic, behavioral, interpersonal, physiologic. That had already been described by Ray Blanchard back in the 90s when he was first talking a lot about the phenomenon and observing that in more clinical populations in Toronto, the clinic that he worked at. So, we took that information, these observations by Ray Blanchard from the 90s, that there were these different types of autogynephilia. We created a new scale that tried to capture those different types, because up until that point, the only scales that really existed for autogynephilia, Ray Blanchard came up with in the in the late 80s, early 90s, and they really only got at more or less the anatomic autogynephilia and the interpersonal as well. So there was no scale that really captured all the different putative types of autogynephilia. So we made up the scale. It was a whole psychometric paper. So we did a factor analysis to see the things fall out the way that you think they would fall out. These different types would be actually captured by the items that we wrote when we recruit a sample of autogynephilic individuals and ask them to fill out the questionnaire. And we did find these 5 factors kind of made the most sense after we got the responses from our participants. These were recruited from online sources. Weren't a lot of them out there in the 2011, 2012, which is when we did this. We looked at some other things like, do any of these specific types of autogynephilia correlate more with, let's say, gender dysphoria or with specific paraphilias like masochism? And the one thing that, at least off the top of my head, that really stood out from some of those additional correlations that we did, or regressions rather, was that anatomic autogynephilia actually predicted less gender dysphoria rather than more, which was kind of a contrary finding to what Ray Blanchard had found. And then also another interesting finding was interpersonal autogynephilia, so being especially sexually aroused, fantasizing about yourself as a woman, going out on a date or interacting with sexually, perhaps with men. That predicted more non-heterosexual identity, so being more likely to identify yourself as bisexual rather than heterosexual. So that was also an interesting finding as well. And that kind of aligns with kind of this idea, what's been called meta-attraction by a lot of autogynephilic individuals. It was once called pseudo-bisexuality, which is this idea that maybe you've talked about this in one of your previous videos, but for some autogynephilic individuals, they might be more likely to report attraction to men or to report non-heterosexual identities, not necessarily because they have genuine sexual attraction to individuals who have male bodies or masculine-looking bodies, but rather because they have a type of autogynephilia, interpersonal autogynephilia, in which they're sexually aroused, thinking of themselves as a woman, having sex with men, and therefore that's where that attraction is coming from. So that's why it's been called meta attraction by some kind of newer generations of autogynephilic people. That's a term that's thrown around a lot in some of these autogynephilic communities. Um, so that's kind of one. That's a bit of a dense paper, so I'm not going to kind of go through all of it, but it was a very quant heavy, let's say, where we did a lot of these different analyses and try to validate this new scale.
No, it's so wonderful you're doing that, because it's like any science, any field of research, it's not like ossified where like you stop at a certain point and say, no, we've learned all we know about it, let's stop. No, I mean, if we had stopped like with Hirschfeld and Freud, well then yeah, we would be like just so like retrograde right now, like just so ignorant about so many things. It's like, no, it's like as science evolves, as society and technology evolve, people adapt and react to that. And people, like, yeah, as humans, we keep reacting and evolving to our environment. It's like a feedback loop. We create things, we invent things, and then those things that we created, invented, start to affect us. It becomes like, yeah, it's like yeah, a feedback loop basically. So it's, yeah, I mean, I'll get into this later on, but yeah, like how modern autogynephiles differ so much from older gynephiles, like of my generation and older, like the ones that Ray Blanchard was. It's like I could liken it to like being a symptom of accelerationism, basically. Like as we approach the singularity, we're all getting like much. Society just becomes much weirder and harder to understand for older people. It's like modern autogynephiles are like modern gynephiles. They're basically like children or precursors giving birth to the singularity. But we can we'll talk about that later in another section here. But yeah,
I like your analogy. It's interesting.
Well, I have a way with words. I mean, it's like I've been told that, it's like like I have the way my mind works. I just come up with these interesting like metaphors and analogies. I throw them out there, but that's how I think. It's like I'm pretty sure I'm neurodivergent, so which is something else we can talk about later about.
Yeah, and also I really, just as an aside, I really like some of the analogies or just generally your metaphors that you've used in your videos, like the tourniquet. What did you use the boomerang too to describe?
Oh yeah,
in your first video. I think these are cool. They help.
Oh, thank you.
I think they help neurodivergent people or other people who think differently to understand these concepts, because they're hard concepts to understand. The idea of sexual arousal from the fantasy of being a woman and how that applies to not only cross-dressers but also trans women. I think that all of that can get confusing for someone who's not very familiar with it. So talking about it with analogies always is helpful.
Oh yeah, thank you. Like, oh yeah, well, for those of you who don't know, who are new to my channel, I have up to this point a 13 episode series called "I Love My Autogynephilia," and basically, as you can tell from the title, it is pro AGP, very pro AGP. It's meant to be life affirming, made to like make people understand like having AGP is not shameful. We're not monsters. We're not broken. We're not dirty. I basically bare my soul in those episodes, especially the initial ones. I talk about my own life experience, and as you were talking about, yeah, the boomerang. That's in episode 1. Basically, it's like I liken having a sexual attraction orientation to a boomerang. It's something you throw out. Your object of your desire, be they male or female, you throw out this boomerang, and it strikes somebody, and that's where you establish, like at the very least, a one-sided connection. You like that person, you're romantically attracted to them. Maybe you want to go to bed with them. Okay, that's the boomerang striking that target. So a one-sided connection initially. Us autogynephiles, we have that boomerang, but we also have a second boomerang, which is this boomerang is quite different. It goes around the object of your desire, and like a boomerang that doesn't strike anything, it goes around, and it comes back and it strikes you. So when it strikes you, then yeah, you become the object of your own of desire, basically. So yeah, that's I just came up with. It's like, yeah, that's a good way to explain it. Basically, it's like you have two boomerangs. One boomerang actually hits an external person. The other one goes around that person, because you're like channeling. Oh, there's a woman. I wish I looked like her. I'm basically, and so it goes around. It takes in that data. Bam, comes back to you. So yeah.
Yeah, and actually, that analogy what you're describing with the boomerang is actually also a really great representation of an erotic target identity inversion, which has been conceptualized as the mechanism through which autogynephilia operates. So some scholars, including myself, have conceptualized autogynephilia as an erotic target identity inversion, meaning exactly what you said with the boomerang. You have an attraction to an external erotic target, let's say women. Most men have this external attraction. However, some men have that internalized, that attraction, as you kind of with the boomerang, it kind of bounces back in a way and hits you. And so you are then attracted to the idea of yourself as a woman. And so this kind of internalized attraction has been called an erotic target identity inversion. Autogynephilia would, of course, be the most common type of erotic target identity inversion because most men are sexually attracted to women. And so if there is to be an aversion among men, then autogynephilia is clearly going to be the most common one that will exist. But there are other ones, not to get too much into that, but I did a study a few years ago on furries and showed that among a large majority of furries, the reason why they might be at least sexually motivated, for those who are, to dress up as cartoon animals, anthropomorphic animals, and create personas or versions of themselves as anthropomorphic animals. For at least some furries, that seems to be motivated by an erotic target identity inversion. They're attracted to anthropomorphic animals on the outside, and then that gets kind of internalized and such that they find it arousing to fantasize about themselves being that kind of an anthropomorphic animal. So that would be another example of an erotic target identity inversion. And for whatever kind of external erotic target you can think of, there is likely a erotic target identity inversion equivalent. And so it just so happens that autogynephilia is the most common one, and that's why it's probably been the one that's been studied the most.
I'm glad you brought up the term erotic target identity inversion. Is that meant to supplant the older term erotic target location error?
So erotic target location error is even broader than an erotic target identity inversion. That is meant to describe any kind of misdirection, if you will, of one's, I don't know if misdirection is the right term, but with erotic target location error, someone who might typically be attracted to, let's say, the whole person, let's say if it's a woman, like a woman's body, that might get directed toward just women's feet. And so erotic target location errors can describe potentially foot fetishes because that target location has been redirected toward instead of the woman herself, it's toward her feet or to her hands or to her clothing. So then there are some men who are just really into, women's underwear specifically. That could be the result of an erotic target location error. Erotic target identity inversions are a specific kind of erotic target location error in which the target location gets redirected back toward themselves so that they then find it sexually arousing to be that kind of person to which they were externally attracted.
Okay.
So it's a specific kind of erotic target location error. And yeah, I also think that, I prefer using the term erotic target identity inversion just primarily because it's more precise, but also it doesn't have the word error in it. And so I know a lot of people take issue with that because it implies there is something morally wrong with that kind of a sexual interest. When really, when the term was coined, it wasn't meant to imply any kind of morality. The error part is more to describe that it's an atypical developmental thing, if that makes sense.
Okay, so well, Kevin, I'm so glad you brought that up because it's actually in my first video when I'm explaining AGP, I actually referred to AGP as an erotic target location error. I mean, yeah, I was kind of like wincing and grimacing saying that because that's how it was described in all the technical journals. But I'm so glad you've actually brought to my attention that actually AGP is more of an erotic target identity inversion. So going forward, that's how I will also refer to AGP and to kind of educate people as well. So yeah, I'm so glad that the academic community is kind of doesn't really see ETLE as a specific way to describe AGP. So it's erotic target identity inversion. So yeah, sorry, fellow AGPs. Yeah, I never really felt comfortable using that term either, but that's what was out there to kind of explain this. So, but yeah, I mean, good to know. So we are actually erotic target identity inversionists. So
Well,
actually
just to
sounds
be
much better.
yeah,
Yeah.
be clear, erotic target location errors kind of are an umbrella term for like describe, like I said, foot fetishism or fetishism for women's underwear, and also all these erotic target identity inversions. But to your point, I think it is more precise to use the erotic target identity inversion because then you're just it's a very different experience, I think, and to be attracted to feet versus being attracted to yourself as a different person. Like those feel very different. So to me, most of my work has been on ETIIs, erotic target identity inversion. So it makes more sense to talk about that group rather than the umbrella term. And also, as you were saying, it's a lot to explain, like, well, ETLE, erotic target location error, the error in that is not referring to any moral issue with it, but rather it's talking about it's an error in development if you think of it in an evolutionary sense so that rather than get into all of that and try to explain all of that to a person who is just going to not listen to what you have to say because they say, well, you're calling us an error, you don't, that's offensive. We don't, I don't think what you're saying has any credence because you're choosing to use that kind of language. So rather than try to explain all of that and explain like, well, no, that's not the way we meant it, I just use the term erotic target identity inversion because it's more precise, it's more clear, and it kind of gets around the need to have that kind of explanation. So, yes.
Oh no, and that is so wonderful to know that I can explain that to people. Yeah, like the academics do not, yeah, our identity is not an error. Our identity is more than a mere fetish. I mean, basically it's like so it's wonderful that you're so open-minded and sympathetic and treating us more humanely in this aspect. We're not just like we're not errors. We're not just, although some of us may ideas fetishists, a lot of us don't. People like myself who have transitioned fully. Yeah, it's like I see myself as a trans woman, as having a feminine spirit. It's not an error. It's just how I am. There's nothing wrong with it. So it's so wonderful that you clarify that. So yes, going forward, then I will also use that as well. Erotic target identity inversion. Yeah, it sounds much more humane and better than erotic target location error. If you're talking about like specifically like how you ID yourself, how you feel about having your AGP. So no, that's wonderful. Good. Yeah. So like I said, yeah, it's so wonderful. It's a much more humane approach and not isolating or being antagonistic towards the subjects, the people that you're studying as well. So yeah, thank you for that.
It's also a different, just to comment on that briefly, it's a different time these days than it was in the 80s and 90s, especially in kind of where a lot of clinical researchers were working. They were working and writing primarily for academic audiences. It wasn't as common back then for laypersons to be able to access a lot of these kind of like peer-reviewed journal articles in these academic outlets. And I've noticed, probably in the last decade or so, there's just been a much bigger thirst for people who are not academic.
Bigger thirst.
Well, that was not why I was thinking of that term, but
ta-da!
It's subconscious, so maybe Freud was correct.
Is Freud around here? Uh-oh.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, sometimes a water bottle is just a water bottle, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I do think the public is more interested in reading the primary source, right, and going and finding the actual academic articles, and there are outlets for that, Sci-Hub, and there's ways to get access to these things now, or actually have a very clear line of communication toward researchers as well, the way that you and I are talking, that I don't think was quite as common back then, especially in these kind of clinical research contexts, right? It was a very different time, I would say. So they weren't really thinking about how these terms might eventually make it out into the public discourse the way that today's researchers, I think at least I try to be more mindful about how this work is going to get out into the public pretty much immediately. And it's going to be, it's important that we be as precise as we can with our language, not only because that's important for scientific rigor and accuracy and being as precise as possible, and also just because we're in an era where I think it's important more than ever that we make sure we things are readable and things are relevant, not only in the academic community but also in public discourse. So try to keep an eye toward being more precise with language, because again, it's not just research that's going to be read by academics, but also the broader public. So it's important to be clear.
Oh yeah, I mean, the internet and social media has changed everything. I mean, which is something we'll talk about later, like how modern autograph files have differed markedly from people of my generation. I'm a Gen Xer, but like I said, yeah, just millennials and Zoomers especially are way different. I mean, they may be going through the same thing physiologically, sexually, like I did, but it's just being so much more self-aware. That's just an aspect of 21st century life. I
don't always understand Gen Z myself, so it's like, so don't worry, you can share our confusion about that.
Well, now we're up to like Gen Alpha, so imagine how much more different they'll be from Gen Z, and especially from millennials. Yeah, it's like.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how all this plays out, especially with respect to AGP and how that gets talked about in that generation, and how they navigate that situation, and hopefully better, but we'll have to see.
No, I mean, accelerationism is alive and well. I mean, we're living in it. I mean, there's some people who believe that the singularity has already happened. So I possibly, it's like, yeah, life keeps getting weirder and weirder, but also more fascinating day by day. That's for sure. So, okay. Go on to question 4 again. Progressively getting along here. So, how is your AGP survey going, and has it led to any insights or progress in your research?
Yeah, that's
you alluded to it. Yeah, alluded to it earlier, but if you want to expand on it further, by all means.
Sure. Yeah, and so actually, I didn't mention that in response to your previous question, but yeah, since the 2 studies I mentioned, the psychometric study that I said was really dense, and then the study on autogynephilic male cross-dressers and their sexual arousal patterns, we showed they tended to be gynoandromorphophilic. So other than those 2 papers, this is the first major project that I'm working on related directly to AGP, and it's as I mentioned, and then you've mentioned on your channel. Thank you again for promoting the survey and helping us get more participants. But I'm working on the survey with Dr. James Morandini, who's at the University of Sydney, and it is what we think is the most comprehensive and perhaps representative survey of AGP individuals that has ever been done. We have well over 1,000 participants at this point, and it's going really well. We've gotten a lot of great feedback on it, and we're excited to launch the second wave of that survey. So it's supposed to be a longitudinal survey, so there's going to be a follow-up. It's supposed to be 1 year. We're a little bit behind. And so actually this week, I don't know when this is going to get released, but this week I'm which is like mid-September, I'm planning to provide an update to anyone who's taken the AGP survey. Thank you again for doing that. So if you took that survey between June and December of 2021, so last year, I'm going to provide an update letting you know that we're just a little bit behind with launching the second wave of the study, which will be a follow-up survey. That will probably come out, fingers crossed, in January of 2023. So that's when you should expect, if you took this survey, to get the next follow-up survey, right? But I'll provide an update to everyone about that, as well as some preliminary results, because just this past summer, we were able to look at some of the data and run some preliminary analyses. We presented a poster about those results at the International Academy of Sex Research this past summer in Iceland, which is a beautiful country, by the way. But anyway, so in these results, we showed like major differences between AGP cross-dressers and trans women. And in particular, trans women, not surprisingly, were higher on gender dysphoria. They were also higher on a number of mental health dimensions, for example, depression and stress and suicidality. So clearly, AGP trans women are, AGP cross-dressers and trans women are in distress. They need support. And AGP trans women in particular appear to be especially vulnerable with respect to their mental health, which I know maybe none of this is surprising. However, it does, I think, call to attention like this issue is not just, this issue is also affecting AGP individuals, and they're the ones where we don't have a lot of information with. We know that the AGP individuals, there's perhaps different developmental trajectories for them. There's different fundamental motivations with respect to them having AGP and having this sexual arousal fantasies of being a woman. And so how do we navigate that? What does this mean for their relationships? Clearly it's, they're having struggles with their mental health. Is that related to their AGP? Is that related to their shame about AGP? Is that related to whether they're getting enough support in this? So there's a lot of things that we are hopefully going to be able to follow up on. So these are just preliminary analyses, right, showing that there are these differences between cross-dressers and trans women. But we want to kind of further interrogate those differences, figure out where are they coming from, how are they related to other factors. And once we collect a second wave of data with the follow-up study, we'll be able to look at kind of how these things change over time, which is a really important question, right? How do AGP cross-dressers and trans women kind of navigate their relationships, their mental health, decisions around hormones or medical transition, social transition, their sexuality, their identity? How do all those things work together over time, and what can that tell us about how we might best support them and how they might best be able to make decisions about these things? So it's a very comprehensive survey, asking lots of different things that I mentioned earlier, and we're really excited. It's just at times we're like overwhelmed. There's like so much information here. Let's start with some of the basics, like what are the differences between AGP cross-dressers and trans women, not to mention, I mean, we have lots of other folks in the sample that there's a lot. And so we're really excited about this. We're still in the very early stages, but we're excited to collect a second wave of data and to really get into more kind of nuances with our analyses. So I'm really looking forward to seeing where this takes us. And I so appreciate you sharing the survey wherever you can and promoting it, and just being a really positive beacon when it comes to AGP research in general. So I'm really happy about that, and I appreciate you giving me the chance to talk about it again here.
Oh, of course. I mean, it's like it's for me, it's a labor of love just to like just put myself out there. It's like, it's like I'm more than aware that I can become like a target for certain people who are like transphobic. It's like I've dealt with a few like terse and nasty people in comment sections of my videos, but I shut them down. I'm too tough to like let them get to me. It's like I don't care. For me, it's all about like, showing my AGP siblings some love, letting them know like somebody cares about them, somebody's being a voice for them publicly. What I'm doing here with you, so thank you so much. And I mean, like I am a proud participant of your survey. I so look forward to doing the follow-up survey as well when you're ready to send that link to me, of course. But it's like, yeah, this really needs to be done because so many of the professionals out there are sadly ignorant, not through their own choosing, just because there's not the message isn't getting out that this exists. It's a phenomenon. Like doctors, therapists, counselors. I mean, even psychiatrists and psychologists may know about this. Um, basically, they may have skimmed over it. Maybe, like as you said, maybe like their education. Oh, this is one of the paraphilias is this, but they don't dedicate themselves to this. There's it's like it's just sadly just underrepresented in the greater like medical and mental health community. Sadly, I mean, I was seeing a therapist, as so many trans people do, working out my issues. My therapist, she was not aware of what AGP was, but thankfully, she was young, open-minded. She was willing to be educated on it. So I sent her like materials, like about hey, this online. Hey, check this out. Like Anne Lawrence's work. Michael Bailey, Ray Blanchard's work. This is kind of like the research that's been done on it, but I also gave her my story as well to kind of get a balance. Okay, this is what the academics view it as. This is my personal story, but she kind of was able to kind of understand that I am trans, but it's a very particular flavor of trans as opposed to like HSTS, which is a different trans as well, but totally different life experience. So but yeah, I had to educate her because she had no idea, and that's sadly the case. Most doctors don't know about this. I mean, even doctors who perform like genital reconstruction surgery, they just think, oh, it's a woman trapped in a man's body. They need to have this done, but they don't know like why. Because many people, obviously, many trans women are not going to be forthcoming and say, oh, this is why, because the doctors don't ask. It's like, okay, no, you've got this for you. You got a psychiatrist letter. That's good enough for me. Let's do this. It's like many of them they don't want to bare their soul. They just want to get it over and done with and move on with their lives, which I totally understand. I mean, most of them don't want to bare their soul like I did on my videos and say, hey, yeah, I'm proudly autogynephilic. So thank you for what you're doing. Is hopefully by getting this more exposed, I mean, we're educating doctors, medical professionals, counselors, therapists, and hopefully trans women to be able to say, oh, yes, okay, there's somebody out there talking about this. I can be more open as well. So, I mean, on my
Absolutely.
video, on my YouTube page, I put like my email address. I'm on a Discord server. I put my Discord ID. Hey, hit me up. Send me a friend request. You want to talk in private? Let's talk. And people have done that. Thankfully,
It's
people
awesome.
have. I mean, prior to my posting my videos in March of this year, I didn't know any trans people. I was very isolated. I mean, that's why I was in therapy. I was just so isolated and very introverted, very shy, and just angst ridden. This was very cathartic for me to do my videos. And it actually was so what I've met so many wonderful people, Kevin, through my
That's so
videos.
great. I'm
They
so happy. Yeah.
people that I actually can actually count as like dear friends. I mean, I have sisters in arms, and like people have just told me thank you so much for what you've done. I've actually been like their therapists, their shoulder to cry on. They're like, I'm very being INFP. I'm very like, maternal. I'm a nurturer. I'm a comforter by nature. It's like, okay, tell me what you got. What's going on with you? I'll listen to you. I'll be sympathetic. I'll console you. I'll try to help you. And people that I now consider so like very, very dear friends, people that emailed me, people I've met on the server that I'm on. It's like my life has just turned around like 180 degrees. It's been therapy for me as well. I'm helping them and they're helping me by just reaching out. I was like, okay, we're not alone, because really, if you've got like a spouse or like family, kids, they may try to be as sympathetic as possible to you, like being an autogynephile or being trans, but really the only other person who will ever truly understand you is another autogynephile. We're all we've got in this world. nobody else will ever really understand us like another AGP. I truly believe it's like we're in each other's heads, basically. It's like a lot of us have the same temperaments, same disposition, we're wired the same way. It's like we make really excellent, great friends because we're so compatible with each other. It's like eerie how some of these people are just so much like me, not just because of AGP, like interests, personalities. It's like I mean, they make, I think they make great romantic partners, great friends, because it's just of the compatibility that we have amongst ourselves. We're a tribe and we're a family.
Yeah,
And it's like,
that's
and
awesome.
this is all about like me networking and meeting other people, and hopefully with, thank you so much for letting us know that, researchers don't have to be our enemy. You don't have us like under like a microscope on a slide, like, looking at us, it's like you actually are trying to get to know us as human beings, acknowledging our humanity and, being friendly towards us. So thank you so much for what you're doing as well.
Of
Yes.
course, and thank you for all of your work on this. And like you just said, I'm just really delighted to hear how much you're connecting and thriving within these AGP communities, and how other folks in the AGP communities have connected with you and found lots of benefit and support from your videos and from your friendship. And that makes that warms my heart, seeing these communities thriving, and people talking with each other and being less alone in this journey to understand themselves and their AGP and how it affects their lives, and be able to lean on each other in that way. Because there's not research out there, and when there isn't a lot of research out there, I mean, what else can you do but talk with each other and learn from each other? And so I'm through the survey that I'm doing with James, my hope is to kind of amplify those voices so that AGP folks haven't had for a long time, and kind of get them involved with research. So I'm very happy to have AGP folks ranging from cross-dressers to trans women kind of consult and give input and feedback on the study, and as it's going on, before it started. And I think that's just going to it's going to help everybody. I think that's going to help us as researchers better understand where people who are AGP are coming from, and AGP folks understand where the researchers are coming from. And so everything, I think, works better that way.
Well, I mean, also, I mean, I know that, I feel safe in saying this because it's not divulging confidential information, but you and I are both on the same Discord server. I won't give the name out because it's invite only, and I don't want to invite like possibly. Yeah,
I think it's open, but maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I want to divulge the name because, I mean, we've had issues with people getting in there who exhibiting like troll-like behavior. So it's kind of like you have to be kind of careful who gets invited in, obviously, because you could have like bad actors going in and wreaking havoc. But
Sure,
but you and I are both on the same Discord server. I mean, obviously, I know you can't be active all the time because you have other interests and pursuits going on, but I'm sure you just sit in from time to time and just like listen to the conversations or read them. You can kind of see how people are burying their soul on the server. It's equal parts therapy session and clubhouse. I mean, people can talk about their interests, non-AGP stuff, just talk, hey, hanging out as friends, just chilling, posting stuff that they think is cool, videos or memes or what have you. But at the same time, there's like an advice section, a venting section, a sex talk section, and I'm sure you've read the combos there. Basically, it's like it's like we just hang out. I mean, you've got people that are like in their late teens, like myself. I mean, I'm 50, but there's no ageism going on in there. I mean, people just treat me as like one of the gang. I mean, I'm treated as welcome with open arms. I mean, basically, it's like there's no like, oh, we don't talk to you. You're too old. Like no, it's like I'm just welcomed. It's like I try to. There's some stuff I don't understand culturally because I'm a little bit older than some of the people in there. But I mean, I do my best. I try to stay in there. But people there have been lovely. I mean, I'm friends with people there who are like in their 20s. I for some reason, I hit it off great with like millennials. It's like we click. It's like basically it's like, so it's like there's many people like in their 20s and yourself, you're in your early 30s. So like I can click with you guys. It's like I know enough about you guys where it's like we can be. I'm sympathetic and friendly. I get you. I was like, maybe I didn't grow up with the same stuff you guys did, but I'm sympathetic. I'm like the cool adult that kind of lets the kids like have fun as long as they're not hurting themselves. Basically, like that's and basically, so yeah, I feel very warmly welcomed. They're just like, I don't feel like ostracized or like shunted off because I'm a little bit older than the rest of them. So it's very nice. It's a very welcoming space.
AGP is transgenerational.
Right? Exactly. Gotcha. Yes, exactly. AGP is the fountain of youth. It's maybe eternally youthful. So I've got the soul of a teenager. So okay. So going on. So okay, going ties in perfectly here. We're just nice progression here. So next question. What differences and similarities do you see between older generations of AGP academics and a newer generation such as yourself?
Well, I think we kind of touched on some of these potential differences between how AGP was studied back in the 80s and 90s, when Ray Blanchard was doing his work at his clinic for gender dysphoria at the time. I mean, even that work was different than some of Hirschfeld's work in the early part of that century. But in any case, I'm assuming you're talking about like Ray Blanchard and Lawrence, Mike Bailey, those researchers who kind of laid the foundation for AGP, a few decades ago, and how AGP is researched now. And we've already established that myself and James are pretty much the only ones who are really doing this work, at least, focusing on AGP. Of course, there are other people who study it, but I think, James and I might be the only ones who are focusing on it. So yeah, I think Blanchard's early work, and he would say this himself, it's mostly descriptive, right? He studied this among a clinical population, and a lot of it was trying to just understand patterns of, different patterns among the clinical population that he was working with, which was, mostly, those individuals born male who were coming into the clinics in distress about their gender, right? So he was drawing from a very particular kind of population. Yeah, in order to understand, he was basically trying to describe these patterns and he came up as a result with his typology, where you have some trans women who might be explained to be motivated by AGP, and others who might be explained to be motivated by androphilia and not AGP. So that was kind of the early work. The newer research, I think, that I've been doing and others have been doing, have been drawing from much larger and perhaps more representative samples due to access to the internet and with the advent of social media. And we just talked at length about how AGP folks have communities now and can talk with each other and get support in ways that maybe they couldn't just a decade or two ago. And so researchers now, including myself, have been really lucky and privileged to have this opportunity to talk with more AGP individuals directly from the community rather than those recruited in more clinical samples, and things are it's a little different in that context, and we can get much larger groups of people anonymously too, given how much shame and fear there is around talking about AGP or being AGP. So that's one big difference, I think, between how work with AGP is done and talked about now compared with even 1 or 2 decades ago. And also, we've already talked about this, I think, in an earlier question, but I just wanted to reiterate that AGP has also just become way more political now than it was back when Ray Blanchard was doing his work in the 80s and 90s, right? So I think researchers we got to be more mindful about how we go about this research and talk about AGP, because things are just more public and things, you know, things can kind of blow up on social media at any given second. You know, with all of that technology that we have now, there's more power that any one person can have, and so you know that changes the landscape of how we do research in this area, which is highly controversial. So, you know, because people have more access to research and are more interested in accessing primary sources, you know, I think newer generations of researchers, not just in AGP, but just when it comes to controversial topics, I think, you know, there's more attention to like how can this be more accessible, readable, and relevant, because this is going to affect the public discourse in some ways. It's going to get out there and probably talked about, and so it's important to be precise. It's important to be clear, and yeah, so that's another difference. And like we were just talking about, I feel like I've made a lot of effort to try to consult AGP individuals as part of my research, and take that very seriously. I try to take the feedback to heart as I develop my research projects and think about them and write about them. So yeah, I think that's important, that the accuracy, the scientific rigor of the research, all that is enhanced when we get feedback from the individuals we're trying to study, because that's, you know, we want to hear directly from them, right?
Sure. Also, quick question here. I was curious. How old is James?
He's in his late 30s, so.
Okay. So still, I mean, but still very much a millennial because he's still in his 30s. Okay. So yeah, definitely. I mean, so it's so refreshing to know like the current wave of AGP research is being conducted by millennials. So, okay, good. So, okay, like I said, like fresh minds, fresh perspective, and for a new century. So, okay, very cool, very cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so that actually ties into my next question, which we also have been discussing earlier, but pretty similar to the last question. But if you care to expand on anything you haven't covered before about what differences and similarities you see between older generations of autogynephiles and like the new current generation?
Yeah, and actually, you and I have had some like private discussions about that, and actually, you have a lot of insight in this too. But so feel free to correct me on anything or to add to anything I'm saying. But the general differences I see, and there are a number of them between older generations of AGP and younger generations of AGP. First of all, with the younger generations, you've got a way wider variety of gender identities, right? And that's just true of younger generations in general compared with older generations. But you see it more starkly, I think, among AGP individuals who, you know, by definition, they're sexually aroused by the idea of being women, and so you see more exploration with gender identity in that population today more than you did in the past, right? So you have more non-binary, questioning, gender fluid AGP folks, those who are kind of exploring maybe earlier transition, or being on hormones much earlier in life than you would see in previous generations. And like we've been talking about throughout this interview, there's more of a community with AGP. You know, it was mostly something that was highly isolating. Sure, there were these societies where cross-dressers would get together occasionally, but given how scared that people with AGP still are about, you know, what this means for themselves or other people that they know, their family members, their classmates, even their mental health professionals or people that are going to write them letters for, you know, gender confirmation surgeries or things like that. You know, they're afraid of talking about AGP. And so a lot of these AGP folks like to be anonymous. And it's a shame that we're in a society where that has to be the case to protect people's um, reputations or livelihoods, but that is the era that we're living in. And because we have technology like social media, they are able to connect with each other anonymously, and that's great. I'm glad that there is an avenue or a venue for that. So more of a community, even if people tend to be anonymous on these communities, and maybe more of a sense of pride that people have about AGP. I mean, there's an AGP flag now, so that's
Yeah.
something that wouldn't have happened decades ago, right?
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
I feel like with older generations of autogonophiles, you really just had people who were, you know, I feel like the choices for them most of the time were like to continue cross-dressing in secret or occasionally go out cross-dressing or go forward fully with like social medical transition. There wasn't a lot of in between that I think exists a lot more. So it wasn't quite as like there wasn't a lot of dimensionality to autogynephilia maybe back then compared with now, or at least it wasn't as visible if there was that kind of dimensionality. And granted, it's not very visible today either, but at least it's visible in places like Reddit and Discord, right, where there are communities that are out there. Sure, it's not something that you see out in the streets or anything.
Mhm.
There's no AGP Pride Day yet. Although I think there is actually maybe there is an AGP Pride Day. I might be wrong about that. But people aren't going out in the streets talking about it or anything, right? So it is still something that is mostly discussed in uh, online, in kind of smaller settings, but that's something that probably wasn't happening at all really back in older times, except in these cross-dressing societies and things like that.
Yeah, and I'm sure. I mean, you're active online. Same like I said, the same Discord server as myself. So you can see how like the lines have blurred between like a lot of the people who nominally ID as AGP in a loosest sense of the term resemble quite a bit like traditional concept of what HSTS women were, trans women were basically. It's like it's like transitioning at a very young age, being attracted to men. Some of them actually ideas that like primarily attracted to men. I actually know a couple of ladies on the server who have husbands, so it's like they basically it's like okay they've made attraction to men. It's like that's their primary. It's how they ID. Of course, I take them at their word. I mean, who better than themselves to you know describe themselves? But yeah, like, I guess it's like what's some people are like very sexual. They're just really turned on like having sex with either men, women, or both. Some people like myself are like ideas like asexual. Or clinical term is anal erotic. Have
And
no like have no
and
yeah
alloerotic, yeah.
yeah, yeah, have no sexual interest in others, but have maybe sexual interest in themselves, possibly. Turned on by is it? I think it's autosexual is the term basically. Yeah, or like or can be maybe just romantically attracted to others, but not sexually. Basically just like going
Yeah.
a certain way point, but not all the way. Basically, some have like aversion to genitalia. Basically be it their own or other people's. But yeah, it's like this. The lines have kind of blurred traditions. Like yeah, like it used to be this stereotype, or maybe it was what Blanchard and earlier clinicians researched. Like an autograph, it was pretty much easy to put them in a nice tidy box. They were like older, middle-aged men who, for the most part, like had like were sexually awkward. Many of them like lost their virginity very late in life, if they ever lost it at all. Some were virgins. Where it found it very hard to be sexually aggressive or romantically aggressive with women. Um, you know, if they did transition, it was transitioning like very late in life, as well. Basically, trying to live as a male, heterosexual, cisgender heterosexual for most of their lives, and I mean, which is basically like my story. Which basically, yeah, like I said, I grew up before the internet and social media, so yeah, I more closely adhere to like the classic Blanchardian AGP as opposed to like the people I know on the server, like I said, millennials and Zoomers. But that again, I attribute that to them growing up with the internet and social media. Had I had those things when I was growing up, I would have been a vastly different individual. I think much more open about exploring my identity, probably medically transitioning much younger in life. I didn't start transitioning until I was like 47, socially and medically. So yeah, it's like very socially awkward with women. I mean, I'll say this here. I mean, I'm a virgin. I definitely, like I said, erotic, asexual. I feel romantic feelings towards women, but I have no desire for sexual contact or intimacy. So yeah, I definitely like typical old school like autogynephile, and I think that's yeah my hangups were because I didn't have a community. I didn't have people who were like non-judgmental and saying, no, hey, it's okay, you can be what you want, we'll accept you. Like on the server, I mean, like I said, I'm a 50-year-old classic Blanchardine AGP. I'm accepted, I'm welcomed. Nobody condemns me for how you know, identify myself. And you can just be what you want. Hey, I'm here, this is what I am, and there's no judgment. Nobody condemns you. You can just say, hey, this is my hang up. They can vent. Oh, okay, well, they try to help. People there are very helpful, but nobody tells you, you need to change who you are. It's the message is accept who you are and be happy with it. I mean, one of my dear friends is tortured by the fact that they're attracted to men, but they thought that because they had AGP, they could not be a trans woman. It was like mutually exclusionary. Oh, if you have AGP, you can't be a valid trans woman. I kind of got through to her, and also by the community that she's in now. I invite her to the server. Like, no, you can be attracted to men. You can also identify as AGP, and it's a valid path to transitioning. It's like even, and she's like in her 20s, but she is like angst-ridden and tortured, but because she was socially isolated. I think that's what it's the camaraderie, interacting with others that kind of helps you to loosen up and realize, oh, okay, yes, I can be this way. I'm still valid. Other people are not judging me. I can be a trans woman. I can be a bi. I can be primarily attracted to men. I can be asexual, and people will love me, accept me as I am. And it's that camaraderie that's so vital. It's so precious for all of us.
Yeah, and that's actually one of my biggest pet peeves with in terms of like AGP and the concept of AGP being misrepresented is that whole idea that, oh, if you're AGP, you're not trans, like those are separate. I think there's this mistaken idea that's being perpetuated by a lot of folks on any kind of political side, that AGP is like equals just a cross-dresser or just a fetish, and then it's separate from trans, when really you can be AGP. They're not mutually exclusive, like you said, right? And so I'm very happy that you were able to have that discussion with your friend, get them connected with the community, and get them support that is much needed. And clearly that's the problem that we're dealing with in this day and age, is you got all sorts of misguided ideas and mischaracterizations of AGP that are out there that just make everything harder to wade through to get to what's really going on. And so hopefully the survey that I'm doing with James is going to help bring some more light to these issues, and also we could probably look at some of the stuff with the generational differences, because we have a really large sample that varies in their age. So maybe we can find potential differences between older AGP folks and younger AGP folks, and how they kind of navigate their lives, and what different developmental trajectories they might take with respect to their relationships or their decisions around transition and things like that.
Oh yeah, definitely. Okay, so okay. Again, it's just a natural progression here. Like, it's wonderful how this is just naturally just leading into one question into the other here. But next question. I mean, again, we've pretty much covered this. If you want to expand on it, though, do you see the Blanchardian typology evolving or possibly crumbling in light of how younger autogynephiles differentiate themselves from older autogynephiles?
Yeah, so I think I've said this earlier, but Ray Blanchard's work, where he came up with a typology, where he came up with the term autogynephilia to describe a phenomenon that lots of other clinicians and researchers had already observed, but he kind of expanded on it and went further with that. that's laid the foundation for the work that now I'm doing. And so I wouldn't be able to do the research I'm doing, and we wouldn't be having the discourse that we're having without it. I think it's an open question, what's going to happen with autogynephilia as a concept and our understanding of it. I like to think that, like you were saying earlier, like you were saying that you feel like you shared a lot of the same development and interests with your fellow autogynephiles, regardless of their age and what generation they're coming from. I feel like the fundamental tenets of the Blanchardian typology, if we want to call it that, are going to hold. However, we need to account for like the nuances that are clearly coming about with the new era of AGP, where you have more non-binary and gender questioning folks, and I feel like there's room for that to be accommodated within the original typology. So I guess in a sense, like maybe um, it's possible that it might evolve where the fundamental tenets are there. However, there are these other aspects of it that are explained through who knows what, because it's still, and this goes back to our earlier points, that it's a vast unknown out there. We're very early in the research of AGP, even though it feels like it's been around for a while. There's not many people have taken up the helm to study it, and so we don't know a lot. Things are changing. As you mentioned in your question, younger AGP folks are kind of more diverse in many ways than the older. So it will be interesting to see kind of what new research uncovers and how that fits into older ideas and or not. So yeah, I'm really excited to see where this goes.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like how you say, like, you're kind of like building upon like what Ray Blanchard did. I mean, for example, I mean, we wouldn't have had Einstein without Newton preceding him. So it's just like a net. Some people, it's like a relay. Somebody runs a certain amount of the race, they pass on the baton, and then that second person moves, progresses, and so
Sure.
on and
Yeah.
so on. It's just like society, technology, culture. It's a natural progressive evolution here.
Yeah.
So okay, so
In this case, though, the relay is really slow, and people are constantly tripping you and adding like additional hurdles.
yeah.
So it's a
it,
very this is like an advanced relay.
Yeah, basically it's like a video game, really. Basically, like you got like people are digging trenches, putting crocodiles in there with like landmines strewn all across the landscape,
Right.
basically.
And then
But yeah, but
the person that's handing off the baton is like, does anyone want this? And then people are like, oh, no, I don't want that. Until
basically like,
someone is,
yeah,
hopefully courageous enough to say like, okay, actually, this is an important enough issue. Enough is enough that people are too afraid to talk about this or study this. Let's do this.
yeah. Like I so very hope like you and James, like just like the first, and hope, and like what's like a wave of like 21st century AGP research. Yeah, I'm sure. Well, I'm sure you guys will be like the fuse, the spark to the fuse that kind of gets the chain reaction going here. Basically, I'm sure it will. So I mean, thank you so much for what you guys are doing.
Yeah, thank you for continuing to talk about this stuff. It's important and is not often talked about. So the more voices that we have, especially positive voices like yours,
Yeah.
the more we can get to the bottom of understanding AGP better. So
Okay. 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 So moving on here. Okay. What is it about the male mind and sex drive that causes them to develop paraphilias and paraphilic disorders?
yeah, so
Now we're really going down the rabbit hole, but now the
yeah,
rabbit
and
hole
so I
is
don't know
lined
that
with barbed wire.
we are going down, I guess, the rabbit hole, if you will, of paraphilia. So I don't know that we really talked about paraphilias too much. I know you have in your videos. So just really briefly, paraphilias, they have to do with unusual sexual interests. They're actually a really ill-defined set of unusual sexual interests that comprise like gynandromorphophilia, autogynephilia, masochism, um, among others, right? Exhibitionism, voyeurism. So these are paraphilias. They're not really well defined, and they're another area of sexuality research that has suffered because people are either too afraid to study it or it's too controversial. So it's been criticized, the concept of paraphilias, for being too vague and there's not enough research on it. So some people have said, oh, paraphilias are just a fancy way of looking down on sexual behavior that you don't like or you think that is weird or unconventional. There's nothing more than just a value judgment when it comes to paraphilias. However, I would argue that there are at least two main observations that suggest that paraphilias are more real, quote unquote, than just a value judgment. The first being kind of what you were alluding to in your question, which is that men, or rather, people who were born male, natal males, they're more likely to develop paraphilias than those born female, natal females. So that's been observed. So if anything has been studied a lot in the paraphilia research world, it's the sex differences between men and women with respect to paraphilias, showing that men are much more likely to have them. And the other observation that has been shown, and I think is pretty well established when it comes to paraphilias, is that when the paraphilias tend to co-occur. So when you have one paraphilia, it's very likely that you have another. So we talked earlier about gynandromorphophilia and autogynephilia and how they kind of go hand in hand. People of gynandromorphophilia tend to have autogynephilia. People who tend to have AGP tend to have gynandromorphophilia. So paraphilias tend to co-occur as well. So these observations, they're much more likely in men or natal males than natal females, and that they're tend to co-occur. If you have one, you're likely to have another. Those suggest this is a concept that's more than just value judgments. There might be something to this, right? And so actually, Mike Bailey and I are working on this project related to paraphilias that hopefully will provide further evidence to support, the validity of it as a concept. But in any case, my point is that there isn't a lot out there on paraphilias other than these two established points that I've just made. So we can only really speculate what it is about natal males that cause them to develop paraphilias. One idea that Mike Bailey and I put out there, we wrote about this in a commentary a few years ago, is the idea that men are more category specific in their sexual response, and that's been shown in the laboratory. I talked about genital arousal studies earlier. So when men come into the lab and you show them erotic clips of men or women, they tend to be more category specific. So heterosexual men tend to show a much stronger response in terms of their sexual arousal to women, but not to men, and vice versa. We're talking about gay men. Women don't tend to show that kind of category specificity in their sexual response. When you bring women into the laboratory, they tend to show sexual arousal in response to all sorts of different categories of stimuli, including men and women, even when they might identify as heterosexual. So I think that the speculation that we put out there with respect to why men might develop paraphilias more is that perhaps there's more chances for male sexuality to deviate in some way because it's so category specific and rigid, that there's more chances for something to get redirected and cause sexual attraction to feet, like the erotic target location area we were talking about earlier, or to the idea of oneself as a woman, gets redirected in that sense, which is autogynephilia, right? So in any case, women's sexuality appears to be more fluid and not less category specific. So, when you bring them to the laboratory, they're not showing as clear sexual response to one category of stimuli versus another. They're much more fluid in that sense. So there might be fewer chances for something to kind of deviate and get redirected to some other kind of erotic target or to themselves the way that men might. So, you know, we also know that female sexuality just works a lot differently than male sexuality, right? A lot of early sexuality research was just focused on men. Eventually, we realized, wait, maybe we can't just apply all these decades of work that we did with male sexuality to female sexuality. It doesn't quite fit the same way. It's like taking a, you know, a circle shape and trying to shove it into a triangle shape. You know, it doesn't really, our ideas about male sexuality might not translate exactly. So I think it's an open question, what is going on with male sexuality such that they're more prone to paraphilias. However, I think that's one possible hypothesis, is this category specificity thing that might make it more likely for something to happen such that they develop paraphilias.
Yeah, and Kevin, like for what it's worth, I mean, in episode 1 of my series, I threw out there, this was just me being like amateur sociologist, psychologist, but that way I see it. Of course, you can feel free to refute this or maybe agree, possibly, but I feel like, you know, it ties into like our biological evolutionary history. I mean, mammalian history. Females, what they all have in common is they're only sexually responsive certain days of the month. They only ovulate only a few days out of the month, and that's um, females traditionally for millions of years were female mammals only were sexually receptive during that time that they were ovulating, when they were sexually otherwise they became asexual. If a male tried to mount them, they would like violently, you know, repel, like, no, get away, I'm not having this, you know. And up until females, obviously, like human females are sexually responsive all year round, not just when you're ovulating. But traditionally, up until humans, female mammals were only sexually responsive when they were ovulating, basically. Whereas what human males and non-human male mammals have in common, all male mammals, is that um, they're sexually responsive all the time. They're constantly like willing to copulate and mate and procreate. Basically, it's like, but they kind of have, it's like males are constantly on the hunt. Okay, where's the receptive female? Where's the receptive female? Like they're always ready to mount. I mean, but they get rejected. They go keep looking until they try to find like another female to basically eventually procreate. You know, it's like that genetic drive that need procreate. You know, spread your seed into the next generation. Keep your DNA going through subsequent generations. You know,
Yep.
like, so basically it's like I think non-human male mammals and male human males is like the same. We can really like sexual frustration. Oh, I want it. I gotta have it. Where's the female? I mean, any for some males, I mean humans, it's like if you can't get a woman, okay, well masturbate. You know, it's like very common, universal among males. Okay, if you can't, you know, pornography. You know, like hopefully, basically, you know, if you can't consensually have sex with a woman, okay, well pleasure yourself. But it's like this urge. You know, it's a very strong, overpowering need in males. Like release this sexual tension, this energy. And I think possibly it's because males are hardwired to be like horny, for lack of a better term, all the time, sexually like aroused and willing to mount to sexually procreate. It's like this force is like so powerful, so overwhelming that it kind of can take on a life of its own and mutate. And that possibly is maybe what causes paraphilias and like paraphilic disorders. I mean, like non-harmful phenomena like AGP, you know, basic, you know, like fetishism, you know, like you said, attraction to certain body parts, attraction to trans women, and then you have like paraphilic disorders, the harmful ones like pedophilia, bestiality, you know, like rape, you know, which do harm others, non-consensual, which is what paraphilic disorders are. I think it's just like it's all a manifestation of this male sex drive. Like, I mean, the testosterone that just kind of floods your brain and says like, you know, procreate, mate, find a mate, find the mate, you know, and you know, traditionally, you know, males would find a mate and it wouldn't be a major issue. It's like, but males, it's like they have this much more complex sex life, having sex, pleasuring yourself, you know, finding interest, like bestiality in animals, or interest in children, basic inanimate objects, like you said. They're basically as like there's like as many paraphilias, I would imagine, kinks, as there are like stars in the sky. Basically, it's like you can just keep going the list on and on. If something exists, you can bet that there's a male that can be aroused by it.
It's like our Rule 34, right? If it
Yeah,
exists, there's porn of it.
yeah. I mean, people are getting off to stuff that hasn't even been invented yet, that doesn't exist. They're inventing stuff of their own in their own heads. Oh, this is what really turns me on. Like very super specific stuff that doesn't exist in reality, but it turns them on. I mean, again, like I said, this is me being like an armchair psychologist. I mean, I don't have a PhD after my name, but I mean, I just wanted to throw that out there and see what possibly your thoughts are on that.
I think that relates a lot to what I was saying, actually. So kind of, yeah, I think what you said makes a lot of sense, right? Evolutionarily speaking, men might have more of a reason to have a more directed kind of um, sexuality. Sexual orientation in men is like a compass for them to direct them to perhaps, adult women so that they can reproduce. So, and maybe evolutionarily speaking, there isn't, perhaps there isn't such a thing that is directing women's sexuality in the same way as men's. Again, this is just speculation, right? Although there are papers out there in which researchers have speculated about that and talked about that, and theorized a lot about this. So, but in any case, with respect to the evidence, it is pretty clear that men do have more category-specific kind of sexual response, and women do not tend to have that, and in fact have a more fluid kind of sexual response, which is why you see, you see more fluidity in terms of women's kind of sexuality, women being more open to kind of same-sex sexual interactions or relationships, even if they at one point were very much heterosexual and were not open to that, and later they are. That you see that more often in women than in men. That's based on like work from Lisa Diamond and others who have studied sexual fluidity and shown that to be the case. Not that men don't have that. It's more common though in women, and so that could be the reason for these sex differences and paraphilias.
Well, also women tend to also be like more like asexual as well. No, well, right? I mean, like showing like a less of an interest in actually having sex.
Yeah, actually, there's some interesting studies that have looked at sex drive differences as a mediator or a way of explaining differences in paraphilias, and I don't remember off the top of my head kind of what those kind of end up found, what those studies kind of landed on.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's people have looked at that and have studied that as well.
Yeah, because something else I wanted to bring up as well is like in my personal history. My AGP manifested at a very early age, like around the age of 5. That's when I went into like my mom's closet, started like trying on her clothes, and just felt this attraction, this calling to do that. And at that time, when you're 5, obviously, you haven't hit puberty yet, so it's like it wasn't for me at that time like a sexual thing. It's just I put on her clothes. It felt nice. It felt comforting, soothing. It just felt right. And throughout my early childhood, I continued to cross dress. I mean, as I got older, I kind of did it incognito from my mom because I found out as I got older, it wasn't really approved by my parents. Yeah, so as I got older, in my childhood, my mom's became less and less like indulging about me, wearing her clothes. So I kind of started to do like incognito, when she wasn't around, when she was at work. And when I was 12, my first sexual experience, my first experience of puberty was while cross-dressed. I mean, I had the house to myself. I was dressed up, wearing her clothes like I'd always been for years. Just because it felt right, and I started got this feeling like in my groin, like I never felt before. Like, oh, what's this? Like a tingly sensation. It's like, oh, what is this? Like, do I need to pee or what is this? And it got like progressively like more intense, and like before, like, bam, my first orgasm. Just I wasn't touching myself. It just my penis reacted to me being wearing women's clothes. It's like that's when like AGP like kicked into like this new dimension. It's like from that point onward, I associated like sexual arousal orgasm to being dressed as a woman. Whereas for years it had
Right.
just been like this non-sexual phenomenon. So, and very early on, from that point on, um, I never really felt comfortable like having a sexual reaction or even really feeling comfortable like masturbating. Um, I mean, when I was like 15, I stopped masturbating cold turkey, which is, imagine you being 15, your hormones are raging, you're in the middle of your puberty. It's like I just didn't like masturbating. I felt very like disturbing and like just wrong to me. So I stopped cold turkey. I stopped cross dressing, and throughout my life, that was my life story. It's like I just from that point onward, I never felt comfortable like indulging and having like a sexual reaction. Masturbating. Like I said, I'm a virgin. I could never bring myself to go all the way with women. So I think what it is now that I'm older, I'm finally understanding myself better with my AGP. Is like I saw like my AGP pre-puberty is like me manifesting like this feminine spirit, but basically, but at the same time, like having this biologically male body with like a male puberty that occurred. So the way it's how I saw it was like me being like this feminine spirit, who I am now, Christina, being evident, manifesting back then, and then this puberty being like this male beast that was raping me. So it's like in a way, it's like I felt like I'm being raped by myself. So it was very like traumatic. It wasn't like most heterosexual, homosexual boys, they have no problem like masturbating, like looking at girly magazines, porn, indulging, completely unself-conscious about it, completely normal, natural. Whereas I never really felt comfortable with that. It just always felt like wrong to me. And I think
Yeah.
it definitely does tie into my AGP. It's like like there was like this feminine spirit. I mean, for lack of a better word, I mean, I didn't rebel against being raised as a boy. I mean, being gendered as male, getting my haircut as a boy, wearing boy clothes. But I was not a typical like macho male either. I didn't like rough and tumble playing. I wasn't into sports. I
Yeah.
wasn't really aggressive. I mean, I was just as happy socializing with girls as I was with boys. I never played with dolls because I didn't have sisters in the house, but I always loved playing with babies. Every time I saw a baby, it would like be like trigger this maternal instinct in me. Like I would want to play with babies. I just found them so cute. And it's like to this day I have like very strong maternal instincts. So it's like this feminine spirit coexisting inside this, biologically male body. I just kind of went along with it. But how I was able to have like an escape valve for that was like the cross dressing. So when my puberty hit, this orgasm, it's like, yeah, I mean, physically, yeah, an orgasm feels great, but I could never really allow myself like to indulge in that and allow it to like let myself feel happy about feeling that pleasure. It's like I said, it's like I felt like it was like this male beast violating this female spirit of me. Like, well, wait a minute. I mean, I was happy cross dressing, and now like puberty came along and smacked me upside the head, and like now I can't wear women's clothes without like having an erection and getting sexually aroused and possibly orgasming. And and like I repressed for most of my adult life. It wasn't until like my mid 40s that I started cross dressing again. And at that point, when I did it again, I mean, I wasn't on HRT yet, so I had to like basically use sports tape to kind of like tape myself down because I didn't want to get aroused by it. I just wanted to like cross dress, but not go back to like that purity that I had like when I was a little kid. So eventually, I just got sick and tired of the sex drive, and that's when I decided to go on hormones, hormone replacement therapy, HRT. And I'm so happy because it killed my sex drive. I wanted to be asexual and not be aroused by presenting as a woman. I mean, I didn't want my burgeoning, blossoming gender identity as Christina to be sexualized. I didn't want to become like a sex doll for myself, as it were. I just wanted to kind of develop and like feel asexual feelings about just being a woman. Like a cis woman can dress up, look nice, admire herself in the mirror, going out on a date for whatever, but she may think, oh, wow, I look nice, I look pretty, but she's not going to be overwhelmed by this desire to masturbate by how she looks. And had I not suppressed my sex drive, that's an issue I would have been still struggling with to this day. So yeah, it's like I realized I wanted to start living and physically presenting as a woman, biologically transitioning, but I could only do that by killing my male sex drive. It's like a lot of us are really tortured by this. I know you've done the research, you've talked to people. It's like we never really feel comfortable being sexually identify having a male sex drive. It's like, to us, it's like, a lot of us, it's like a curse or a burden. It's like, we want to be women, but we can't be that by having this testosterone just raging through our bloodstream. It's like, we see ourselves as like split personalities, as it were. This female asexual spirit and this raging male beast kind of coexisting in the same body. And eventually, like, well, one or the other eventually has to take over. And for me, it's like, I decided to get rid of the beast by, killing neutralizing my sex drive. I'm so just happy now. It's like clear-headed. The estrogen now that I'm taking, it does change you. I definitely perceive and feel things on a much more stereotypically feminine way. I mean, I'm much more emotional. I cry a lot easier. I mean, I'm much more like empathetic, compassionate now. I think it's just naturally because the estrogen. It's like, and I love the way I am now, whereas before I wasn't happy that way. So, but I'm sure you've heard stories similar to that from other people you've talked to. So.
Yeah, you're not alone in that kind of journey, and I'm so glad that you found a path for you that made sense and made your life, what sounds like, improved your life and made you feel happier. And I think the goal of this work that I'm doing with the AGP survey is to kind of better understand those kinds of different trajectories that AGP individuals might take in their lives, dealing with that kind of issue and others, so that we can best help them and they can get information that they can use to help themselves. So yeah, and actually the point you made about like kind of this conflict, right? I don't think that's uncommon among people with AGP, right? In some ways, the desire to become a woman is incompatible with the sexual arousal that you feel from the idea of being a woman. So that is something that I've seen in people's descriptions of their experiences with AGP. AGP individuals who find this, who really desire to become women in part due to their AGP. However, by being aroused by the idea of being a woman, that almost doesn't quite work out with wanting to be a woman, because that's a very, like you said, it feels like a very male thing to have an erection while you're wearing women's clothing. And so in some ways that it's hard to reconcile those two things. So
yeah, I mean, it's like AGP, like I said, it is like a universe unto itself. I mean, some of us are like, I classify them, this is my classification, like fetishists. Yeah, I mean, it's like they're completely happy having a male sex drive. I mean, they dress up specifically for the purpose of being aroused, and they pleasure themselves. I mean, they have no desire to transition medically because that would kill their sex drive. Like, I mean, that's fine. What they're, as long as what they're doing is, not harming others, whatever they do in the privacy of their bedroom, or not being exhibitionistic about it, I'm totally fine with that. Like I said, if it's not harming others, it's consensual. You're not throwing it in other people's faces. If it's sexual, do your thing. Whatever gets you through life, of course. But then there's people like myself who don't want to fetishize it. We aren't comfortable with sex drive. But I mean, I still acknowledge those other people as AGPs in a way, because yeah, they are getting sexually aroused at the thought of being a woman. So it is AGP. Like I said, it's a universe basically. It's like, and again, even among people, not everybody has the same intensity of AGP. You have people like myself where like the gender dysphoria gets cumulatively worse, where you feel you have no choice but to transition. And you have people who have AGP, but maybe I suppose it's a more mild form, where like they get married, they have sex, they become fathers. They actually have ideas, cisgender heterosexual males, but they have like this inner fantasy life of being a woman. So I mean, they're also autogynephiles, but somehow, I mean, the intensity, I would imagine, is less. It's like that's like the secondary identity, and their identity as a heterosexual male is a primary identity. And there's not this conflict. It's like they're content to, like, they can have sex, girlfriends, like I said, get married, be fathers, and they have no desire whatsoever to cross dress, much less transition. But they're just content to have this fantasy life. Maybe that's how they can only have sex with their wives, is imagine themselves as women, but it doesn't overwhelm them where they want to externalize the internal fantasy life that they have. So yeah, it's very nuanced. It's not like we all have like
Definitely.
for all of us, it's not cranked up to 11 like it was with me. Some of us it's maybe down at 1, 2 basically, and everything in
Yeah.
between. It's like it's very nuanced and like gradual basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's kind of hopefully what this study, the one that I'm doing with James, that has over 1,000 participants,
Mhm.
hopefully be able to figure out these, you know, does it the different intensity of AGP, the different types of AGP, different expressions of AGP, how do those all, you know, interact or intertwine in ways to lead some people to feel more or less gender dysphoria, or to feel more or less desire to socially or medically transition, and how does that affect their relationships and mental health? So there's so many different threads here that you could follow, and how these things kind of work together or against each other even. So there's, it is a universe, like you said, waiting to be explored.
Um, Also, in your research here, Kevin, do you believe? I mean, if this is my belief, of course, you can feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. That a lot of us, if not all of us, with AGP, have like are neurodivergent, um, or possibly like a lot of us also possibly it manifests like autism or on the autism spectrum. I mean, is that the case? Have you found like a that to be the case, like a large percentage of neurodivergence or autism, um, like being manifested with people with AGP?
Those of us who study AGP, which is admittedly very few, um, and I suppose I should have included Mike Bailey in that. He's studying AGP too, but you could consider him in the older generation, I suppose. In any case, yeah, we've talked about or we've suspected that maybe AGP individuals might be more likely to have autistic traits, given that there's a tendency for them to gravitate toward nerdy interests. And there have been some studies that have shown that AGP trans women relative to non-AGP trans women are higher on measures of autistic traits. But that there hasn't been a lot of work done on that particular issue. And in fact, there's been a lot more research done showing that like people with gender dysphoria in general are higher on autistic traits, or are more likely to be neurodivergent. So, it could be more related to the gender dysphoria than it is to the AGP, because as you know, there are a lot of AGP folks with gender dysphoria. So it's a question of which is it that's, is it the AGP or is it the gender dysphoria or both that's relating to autistic traits or neurodivergence? That's a question that is also waiting to be explored. And we have some data on that in our survey, so I might be able to update you on what we find in the future.
No, I would love to hear that by all means. This also ties into what we're talking about here. About it seems to me. I mean, obviously, I don't have like the statistics in front of me, but many of us. I mean, I'm not including myself. I'm going to be humble here, but many of us are very smart, like wicked smart. I mean, you just mentioned a lot of us are like interested, have like nerdy. A lot of us are like in the STEM field. So I mean, highly intelligent people. So do you see possibly a correlation with having AGP and possibly having a higher than average IQ?
That I don't know of any work that has looked at that particular issue. Um, I guess there's the stereotype of nerdy people being smart. I don't really know a lot about that. I don't follow that line of research. I don't know if that's a stereotype. I don't know if people have looked at that empirically or anything. But so the answer is that we don't know about that particular relation. But that's interesting. I'm glad that you shared that. Yeah, there are a lot of really bright AGP folks.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I don't include myself. I mean, like, because I'm not a STEM nerd. I mean, I consider myself to be like an arts and culture geek, but I'm not good at mathematics, engineering, the sciences. I mean, nothing like that. I mean, I'm more like of an artistic, like arty farty type of person. Like, yeah, that so like I guess like it's like a right. I think it's like what they call right hemisphere people are more like artistically inclined, creative. That's like my thing. But yeah, like as far as like being like a STEM person, that's not me. That's why I said not all of us are like that, obviously. But many that
Yeah.
I've talked to, I just seem to be like very smart. I mean, it's just obvious to me that they have high IQs, even though they may not have taken an IQ test. It's like I can just tell. It's like, yeah, this
Yeah.
person is smart. Yeah.
And to be clear, you can be into arts and culture and have a high IQ. I don't think those. I don't think it's necessarily the case that.
Hmm.
I mean, I don't. Again, I don't know the literature on that on
Yeah.
IQ quite as much.
Hmm.
Uh, but you know, I do know that you seem very bright and that you definitely know what you're talking about. So
Oh, well, thank you. I'll let others like sing my praises if they so desire. But yeah, I try to be humble and just like okay. But yeah, thank you for that. I mean, yeah, I mean, like I never went to college. I'm an autodidact, but I am like an avid reader. I just have like a love of learning. I'm very fascinated by the world around me. So like yeah, I mean like well, I mean what I do have in common with my siblings is like I love science fiction. So like basically like that seems to be like a given like amongst many like trans women in general, like interest in science and science fiction. So that I can relate to like basically. So it's like yeah, as well. But yeah, but well, thank you. But yeah, I like to think that at least I can get by in the world and not be at the mercy of smarter people and be there as well. I can kind of hold my own as it were. So, but yeah, thank you.
of course,
Oh, so this is kind of ties in, but differently here. There's also a phenomena amongst natal women called autoandrophilia (AAP), which has been called like the mirror image of AGP, which is biological women or natal women who are aroused at the thought of like being men. A lot of them are actually aroused at the thought of being gay men. So I mean, do you see that as basically literally like a mirror image of AGP, but just like in a female brain, or is it something a different animal in your belief?
we don't know enough about that either. There have been very few cases of them in the clinical literature.
Mm-hmm.
I know because I've talked to a number of AGP folks who have tried to push for more discussion and research on autoandrophilia in women, and saying that they know a bunch of autoandrophilic women. And so I think we are at the point now where we could probably study that more carefully and get a better um, understanding of what's going on there, because Ray Blanchard and Mike Bailey, they wrote a piece about autoandrophilia and kind of what you kind of going back to what you were just saying. They concluded that what appears to be autoandrophilia in natal females is really what they were calling auto-homoerotic gender dysphoria. So they really want to be gay men specifically. It's not quite analogous to autogynephilia in natal males. So that seems to be the best conceptualization of that is currently out there right now. Given the lack of data and research on the subject, we just don't know what's really going on. So I would like to see more work on that.
Okay, so it's like similar on a superficial basis, but not literally a mirror image is of ATP. Then basically, it's like its own phenomenon, distinct from AGP, as it were, basically.
Some have speculated that, yeah.
Hmm.
But I wouldn't personally go as far to say that that's exactly what's going on.
Hmm.
This is based on like some case studies, and there are more and more autoandrophilic women, or those who claim to be autoandrophilic women. So, maybe we need to look into that and study that more carefully.
Oh, okay, good to know. So basically, to a final question here, at least what I've written down here, basically, Kevin, is do you think as AGP research and AGP becomes more like disseminated out into like general society, like hopefully like what I'm doing here with you and my videos and whatnot, portraying AGP in a positive light and non-orthodox trans narratives, do you think that going forward, like society will be like more amenable or more open-minded and compassionate to people like myself and my fellow siblings as far as like accepting non-traditional narratives of what it is to be trans. I mean, no, actually accepting that some trans women transition because of their AGP and not because like literally, oh, a woman trapped in a man's body and just leaving it at that. If people, I mean, for example, I'm brutally honest. I mean, my videos, I talk about, like, I bare my soul about like what I went through. I understand not all women, they don't want to like wear a placard around their neck saying I transitioned because of this or whatever. They just want to move on with their lives. I totally understand that. As someone who is fully legally and socially transitioned, I'm not wearing a placard saying, hey, I have AGP, blah blah blah. No, I mean, I do that. There's a time and a place for that online in my videos on my channel talking to you. But yeah, I just want to get on with my life, be acknowledged as a woman, not be subject to transphobia or be treated nastily, which I haven't, thankfully. People have been very sweet, very wonderful, and validating me in my identity now that I'm fully living as a woman. But do you see like this research or like the narratives of getting disseminated more into wide cisgender, society is possibly like helping to people be more compassionate and understanding about who we are, like being more accepting of, like I said, non-traditional, unorthodox narratives about what it is to be transgender?
Yeah, absolutely. The more we push these narratives out there that are not just the standard, women trapped in a man's body narrative, the more we're going to reach acceptance. The more people are exposed to different ideas, especially not just from AGP cross-dressers, but from AGP trans women and other diverse folks in the community. That the more we have those voices heard, the more acceptance and open-mindedness we're going to get. I mean, that's how it's worked with lots of different sexual minorities throughout history, is just pushing to be heard. And research, I think, is going to help that. I mean, yes, the political right weaponizes AGP to hurt and stigmatize trans women. There are a lot of gender critical people out there who kind of reduce AGP to like this caricature of like sexually deviant men, and then on the other side of it you have like folks on the political left who kind of are really worried about AGP and how that can be misused to hurt trans people. But in response, they try to suppress these ideas and try to make sure this research is not talked about. They kind of misrepresent the research and say it's been debunked, this is not true, it doesn't apply, and they kind of muddy the discourse even more. So I disagree with all of that. I really think we need more research because it's going to open the doors for people to understand this issue better, to understand people with autogynephilia better. And it's really, I mean, if anything, it's AGP individuals who are struggling, right? They're caught in the crossfire of these kind of culture wars and the political debates that are going on, because there's no research that's happening, there's no good discourse that's happening, and so they are stuck to fend for themselves, to not understand what to do, and they're in distress. I mean, James, he works at a gender clinic, and he has lots of teenagers and other youth with AGP who just, and they don't know, it's hard to help them when we don't have clear answers or the tools to help them navigate their situation, whether they're experiencing gender dysphoria or just trying to figure out how to reconcile AGP in their social relationships or with like their identity or their mental health, other aspects of their lives. So hopefully the research we're doing is going to give us insight into like what will be helpful for them. If you have this level of AGP or that type of AGP, or you have this going on or that going on, how can we best inform people and give them more information, basically. And hopefully that gets out there into the public discourse. People are exposed to more about AGP, and I truly believe that's going to bring about the acceptance. That's going to bring about support as people, people look to research to understand things. And so this is a tipping point here, hopefully, as you've kind of mentioned in some of your other videos, where people are really interested in this. There's not a lot of information out there. Let's get that information out there. Let's do a good job with that. And hopefully that brings about society ideally being on board with this.
Well, yeah, I definitely see it as like each successive generation is becoming more open-minded, not just of AGP, but just like unorthodox gender expression, sexual orientations. I mean, like people like Gen Xers, we're kind of like a hybrid. A lot of us still have like the conservatism of like the baby boomer generation. Some of us kind of have like the forward-looking progressivism of like millennials. Like I myself count myself as the latter category. But yeah, for me, like Gen Xers are kind of like 50-50. They could either go like conservative or maybe kind of go like progressive and more open-minded, whereas millennials tend to be like more like progressive and less conservative. Like Zoomers even more so. It's like it is becoming like this definitely it's like leaning heavily towards like just progressivism and less conservatism with each successive generation. So it's like I feel like as millennials and Zoomers and Gen Alpha, they become older, become like a more significant percentage of the population. That will change because you're going to be just like totally like chill and open-minded. Oh yeah, so if you're this, you're that, fine. As long as you're not hurting others, do your thing. It's basically so. But I think also what it would help to get across to people, Kevin, is like, I mean, I know you said like the research is still very rudimentary. There's a lot more work to still be done on this, but is it safe to say that there is a possibility, a strong possibility that AGP is manifest in the womb, that we're just like wired to be this way before birth? Is it possible? Does it seem unlikely now based upon what you've researched?
I think I mean, AGP is a paraphilia, or has been thought of as a paraphilia, and we don't even know with respect to paraphilias how they might develop, although there is some like preliminary work that might suggest it's something that is inborn. It might not be genetic, but at least inborn, given how early some paraphilic traits have sometimes manifested. For example, there's been a couple of case reports where there was like a 3-year-old, I believe, in which he showed evidence of like an erection or sexual arousal from wearing like a women's clothing at that early of an age. So I mean, that could be evidence for, if not inborn development of AGP, at least really early development.
Or possibly maybe even like exposure to like the mother's estrogen in the womb, possibly.
We don't know, so I don't want to say.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know. I mean, anything's possible, but
okay.
Who knows? I mean, certainly, I think it would be interesting to do some kind of like familial study to look at how AGP kind of might have some kind of like pattern across generations or families. I mean, I've heard stories of people who are cross-dressers or AGP who found out like one of their family members was a cross-dresser or AGP as well, and so that's always interesting. And you have to wonder, is that like the result of the shared family environment, or is that genetics, or what's going on there? So fortunately, we're not really at that stage yet in this study of this subject, because guess what? There aren't a lot of people doing this. There's so much work ahead of us, and it's not exactly a topic that's going to get like a lot of attention from funding or anything like that. James and I actually are thankful that the Conru Foundation has actually been grateful enough to help fund this, help fund the survey, because there'd be so few. I can't think of any major funding agencies, at least, that would be willing to do anything with AGP, right? It's a very not only is it really controversial, but a lot of people think it's really niche and like, how does this apply to me when they, because again, they're thinking really narrowly about how AGP is like, oh, it's just, sexually deviant men who like to cross dress, and that's the main, when it's really much bigger than that. And it's a lot more, it applies to a lot more things than they think that it does.
Well, I mean, I don't feel like I'm outing anybody by saying this because I'm not naming specific names, but I mean, if you believe the statistics or the research, I mean, it's believed like the majority of trans women exhibit some form of autogynephilia, whether varying degrees as well, right?
Yeah, so based on work that Anne Lawrence has done, it seems increasingly likely that like trans women in the West are overwhelmingly AGP rather than the other type of trans woman, whereas you have the reverse kind of pattern in Eastern countries.
Oh, okay. So I mean, at this point, I mean, hopefully, like I said, you get more funding. This becomes like more of justified in getting like the research grants. But do you know of any studies where like brain scans have been done of like trans women pre-HRT, where you can just get like their natal brain chemistries or brain patterns or how their brains are wired?
There have been some neuroimaging studies of trans women. Thinking there's this group, Savick, I forget where she's located, but there is a researcher who does work on neuroimaging related to trans women. And then Doug Vanderlin's group, I think Malvina Skorska has done, she's a postdoc who works with Doug, and I think she's put out some good research related to neuroimaging and gender dysphoria. However, most of these studies don't really differentiate like very clearly by sexual orientation or AGP. So actually, those researchers have, which is cool. But there's no study that is focused specifically on the brain scans of AGP individuals. It's usually that's a secondary focus if they look at sexual orientation differences or anything like that.
No, I hope, like you said, if like this becomes like more wide known, you can justify the research for it and get like more grants. That you obviously, I would imagine more money entails getting like having more access to more equipment and being able to do studies, recruiting people and whatnot. Because yeah, it would be fascinating for people that openly identify as AGP that before they go on hormones, go in there and get your brain's image, like what's going on inside your head, basically. Because obviously once you go on hormones, and that changes everything. You've got estrogen going through there, and it changes how your brain is wired, so to speak, basically, as well.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, I just liken it to be like one of the mysteries of life. It's like like why are some people gay or lesbian? They just are. It's like it's still not known. Is it in the womb? Is it like societal, some kind of imprinting very early in your childhood? Is it both? It's like we don't know. It's like some things are just like mysterious. I think people just want like concrete answers. No, why are you this way? It's like I don't know. It's like it's like why are you trans? Well, I just am. It's like it's like like why are you gay? It's like I just am. But like what you said earlier, up until 1973, homosexuality was classified as a mental illness. Thankfully, it no longer is. It's just treated as a valid alternative to heterosexuality as being a sexual orientation. So it's my hope, in my lifetime that AGP will also not be stigmatized and just, okay, yes, this is a valid reason for trans women for individuals assigned male at birth to transition and just identify as being women and be acknowledged as such. I mean, what I've told people who've criticized me is like, oh, you shouldn't be in our spaces, these people are like sexual predators. It's like, well, I try to tell them, well, you don't understand. I mean, we don't fantasize about raping women. A lot of cases, like like the interpersonal AGP, a lot of us actually fantasize about being raped as women. Actually being made like passionate love to by a man, either consensually or non-consent, like rape fantasies as a woman, being the bottom. Yeah, we don't fantasize about being the top. We fantasize about being the bottom and being made love to. Yeah, raping, that's a very, it's a, like just a ultra like masculinity gone so terribly wrong when you raping somebody. It's like, yeah, we don't see ourselves as like being a penetrators. We see ourselves as being penetrated. It's like that's the fantasy, being made love to as a woman. So like, why would we be loitering in women's restrooms to like molest women when like, no, it's like, but again, it's like just trying to educate people, and it's that's why I said no, no, our fantasy lives are not like that. I mean, I tell these people, it's like you should be worried about men who have a very unhealthy sex drive, who don't identify as women. They're the rapists, because obviously, if you see yourself as a woman, then it's very like, incongruous to see yourself as a as a rapist. It's like no, you see yourself as being like a victim in many cases in these fantasies we have. So I mean, it's like I try to kind of use logic to get through these people. It's like no, I'm not becoming a woman so I can rape women. It's like it's illogical really when you look at it at face value. But some people are just very unfortunately irrational. They just stick to their beliefs and they don't want to be budged. But some people are very open minded and are willing to like listen to like our narratives, and you can reach hearts and minds that way, 1% at a time. So
That is the hope, right? That's the ultimate goal with the work that you and I are doing is to be able to reach people who are, maybe kind of in between where they're feeling or they might have unsure feelings about the issue, but could be convinced one way or the other. We want to be able to show them like, hey, here's the evidence
yeah.
or here's the logic or whatever it may be that, this is a real phenomenon and it deserves the attention that it's not getting. And so that's kind of all we can hope for with pushing forward.
Yeah, I mean, so actually another point I make in my first video, going back to my first video, it's like so for males anyway, even in some women, so many like innocuous, mundane life choices or life decisions, in my opinion, are actually based on like sex drives, basically. Like for example, like a guy going to the gym, getting like working out, getting like a ripped body, looking really muscular, really fit. He's doing it to attract a potential sex partner. Really, if you unconsciously, if you really think about it, they're not doing it just for themselves. It's like they want to make themselves attractive to others, be it another man or another woman. A lot of middle-aged males, they go through a midlife crisis. They buy a sports car, they buy a flashy wardrobe. If they get plastic surgery, if their hair is falling out, they get hair implants, a toupee. Why? They're trying to attract younger women. I mean, a lot of women also like they get plastic surgery, they work out. I mean, again, they're trying to make themselves attractive. I mean, yeah, maybe there's like an aesthetic thing of like, yeah, they want to look good for themselves. But I mean, this is me, of course, just my 2 cents worth. But it's ultimately a lot of it is because yeah, they want to look attractive so they can find like a desirable sex partner or romantic partner to be somebody to be with. It's like unconsciously maybe, but there's this kind of like millions-year-old legacy of like yeah, finding a partner, a sex partner to basically spread your genes, to the next generation. It's like maybe we sublimate it by saying, oh yeah, I just want to look nice. Well, yeah, you want to look nice, but you care about looking nice to others. I mean, yeah, I mean, if you really people are honest with themselves about it. So if people can work out, get a nice wardrobe, get plastic surgery for those reasons, why can't for some trans women, not all, I'm saying this, but some trans women, why can't maybe sexuality be a primary or at least a strong motivation for also transitioning, surgically or socially as well, or hormonally? I mean, I said that's my 2 cents worth. I'm not saying that is the case, but that's how I see it, and that's the point I made in my first video. So I mean, yeah, like I said, I'm not saying that I'm not repeating something that others have said. This is just me. This is just my opinion strictly. So you can take it with a grain of salt, but yeah, I'm just throwing it out there. So.
Well, thank you for sharing it. I think it's, it definitely follows from a lot of the literature that's out there in terms of evolutionary psychology and mating, mate selection, things like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm in the minority of like being asexual. Most people are sexual. They desire to have sex with, be it with a same sex or opposite sex. Heterosexual, homosexual. Most people enjoy sex. They want to have it. They want to have like they want to be found attractive by other people for sexual purposes. I mean, it's completely understandable. So it's like, how many of our mundane life decisions really are not don't revolve around like ultimately like making yourself attractive to somebody, having being found sexually attractive by somebody else. I mean, really, I mean, even myself, I'm asexual, but I like to look nice. I mean, I'm not tooting my horn and saying like I'm glamorous or anything, but I mean, I'm not averse. I'm not averse to somebody telling me, "Hey, you look nice." It's a thrill, of course. I'm not going to lie. I mean, it's incredibly validating. It's like an ego boost for somebody to tell you, "Oh yeah, you look nice. You look hot." Of course, even an asexual like me, I still find that very validating. Of course. I mean, who doesn't want to be found attractive, regardless, you know? So.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, yeah, being complimented on is always nice, and you do look really nice. So,
Oh, thank you. Well, I mean, like I said, I mean, I did my best. I mean, like I said, what I did for myself. It's like, you know, I didn't transition to become eye candy to others. I mean, of course, I love compliments, but it's like what I did was satisfaction for myself. It's like I had to do this. But of course, having said that, I want to look nice for myself. I want to look in the mirror and say, okay, I look presentable. I look good. Because yeah, I mean, like I said, like I think, as Alan Lawrence wrote in one of her papers, you know, becoming what we love. This woman that was inside me, I finally, as much as possible within the bounds of science and surgery, medicine, externalized her. So it's like with this XY chromosome body, I did the best I could. You know, it's like I mean, I have yet to have bottom surgery, but it is my plan definitely to have that done. Hopefully within the next couple of years, finalize my transition all the way. But yeah, I've had surgery on my face. I've been on hormones for 3 years. I've had electrolysis. So yeah, I do everything I can to be as passable as possible for aesthetic purposes, but also for safety purposes. I don't want to attract the attention of transphobes out there and just be instantly clocked and say, "Oh, there's a trans woman that I'm going to bash her head in." You know, it's like it's sad, but it's the world we live in. It's like if you want it's a survival mode to like look as much as possible like the gender you identify as. It's I mean that's my strategy, but what I'm trying to do, it's like okay, So, but I do what I can. So, but I feel happy with myself, with my life, and like I said, I have yet to encounter any overt transphobia. People have been very lovely and sweet and validating. So, I mean, life's good. So,
it's awesome. I'm glad you're able to get that. Not everyone is fortunate, especially folks who live in other parts of the world or even in the U.S.
Mm-hmm. Well, Kevin, I mean, I've gone through all the questions I wanted to ask you, but like in closing, is there anything else you'd like to talk about that we haven't covered yet?
I think we've covered quite a lot. I think we've covered all different aspects of AGP research that I've been doing. Talked about paraphilias for a while and sex differences and sexuality and sexual orientation. You've done a great job of like hitting a lot of different issues related to gender and sexuality and AGP. So awesome work. I know this is your first interview, and you were a great host. So thank you for having me and giving me this opportunity to talk about my work and my commitment to helping people with AGP and helping, and just in general, thank you for having this channel and giving a platform for these issues which are not given the time of day most of the time. So it is very nice and refreshing to have someone like you talk about this openly and share your own experiences as an AGP trans woman, and just being a really awesome person who's spreading love and positive feelings in the community. Yes, so that's really
No,
appreciated.
no, thank you so much, Kevin, for coming on here and for your kind words. And like, yeah, like I said, I'm doing my bit as you are. You're doing your bit from AGP education and spreading AGP love. Any further research, any news or advancements, please. I know you'll keep me in the loop. I mean, I count you as a friend.
Absolutely.
Like I told the audience earlier. I mean, we've been corresponding now for several months. I count you as a friend, definitely an ally of the AGP community. You're not an antagonist. I mean, I mean, people I've met, I send them your way. Like, hey, here's his email. You know, I tell him he's a very nice man. You know, he's very approachable. You know, talk to him. You know, he will, basically he will talk to you. Basically, so it's like, hopefully, one heart and mind at a time. We're healing the community and getting the word out here. But I thank you so much for your time and coming on
Of
here. So,
course.
and
Uh,
in closing, lovely audience, like as I said in the beginning of this episode, this is a debut episode, but I hope it's not the last. So, as I invited Kevin here to speak with me, I invite you as well to be guests on this podcast series. So, I will be submitting my contact information below, my email. I'm on Discord. So, if you identify as trans or just like our gender identity or sexual orientation rebel, and would like to kind of just speak your piece and get your message and your voice out there, I'd be more happy to consider you as a guest on the show. I mean, contact me and we'll see what happens here. But at least for the time being, I've got this one episode going on under my belt, but I'd like to keep it going with further wonderful, fascinating guests as yourself. And I can't thank you enough for being gracious enough with your time here on, I know your time is precious. I know you're busy with your being back in classes now in school and whatnot, but I so appreciate what you're doing. And tell James Morandini, even though I don't know him, thank you so much for what he's doing as well. Maybe one day I'll have the
I
pleasure of
will.
talking. Maybe one day I'll have the pleasure of talking to him either through email
I
or
love that.
on
You
the
love that.
podcast. Yeah.
You would
Or
love
maybe,
that.
I'll make both of you guys here, the three of us, just having a chat here. It would be
That would be
wonderful. So,
fun. I would
yeah.
really much. We'd look forward to that. And yeah, stay tuned. Also, you and anyone else who's watching, we've got uh, big news coming in terms of the study, and hopefully more updates with the data and the new wave. We'll be restarting that survey and doing the
Mm-hmm.
follow up pretty soon. So lots of cool and interesting things in the pipeline.
Oh, it's wonderful. Yes, like I said, I look forward to corresponding with you and with the greater you corresponding with the greater AGP community. And yeah, it's like I said, this is just like the dawn of a new day here, basically. Like we're on the cusp of AGP. Accept. I'm so excited for this. Yeah, I look so forward to working with you. Like with hopefully James
Absolutely.
Morandi. Like yeah, definitely. I mean, it's like what I've done with my videos. I just hope to be like the advanced guard. I mean, I so hope that people are inspired by what I've done and they come forward and make their own videos or their own social media statements as it see fit. As long as they're like just expressing their AGP love, and the more people like me doing this, the more widespread it'll become. It'll just become more mainstream. Basically, that's what it's my hope that we don't have to like live in shame or in denial about who we are. Basically, because we are like very wonderful beings, if I do say so myself. We're very yeah,
Yep.
we're outside the mainstream, but it's people outside the mainstream that like make society and culture so cool, like the innovators, the trailblazers, as it were. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for having me, and I look forward to your next videos on your channel, whether they're individual or interview based.
Well, I hope to keep this thing going as long as I can come up with like original content where I'm not regurgitating stuff from the past. I'll gladly keep doing this. This is why I want to do this. I've up to 13 episodes on my series. I figured that I want to do a podcast now. So this has come. I want to
That's
concentrate,
awesome.
spend my energies on podcasts, have others talk instead of me talking for an hour or so. But yeah, this was a fascinating, very entertaining, illuminating convo I had with you here. But again, thank you
Yeah.
so much. Thank you so
I
much.
enjoyed it very much. Thanks so much, Christina, for having me, and look forward to next time.
Yeah, like I said, I'll be putting Kevin's contact information below if you want to get in touch with him by email. So yeah, he's a wonderful person, very approachable, and yeah, like I said, show him some love because he does really care about us. He is a friend and an ally. So thank you so much, Kevin, and I hope to have you back again soon and for a second round of another wonderful conversation here. So.
I would love to. Thanks.
Okay. As for all of you, dear viewers, I love you all so much. Thank you so much. Like I said, this has been the debut of Transgender in a Blender, but hopefully not the last episode. If you want to talk to me and be sitting where Kevin's sitting opposite me, hit me up on Discord or my email, and we'll see what happens. So, love you all. Take care. Bye bye.